Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 158. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my son, Chris Raygun. Chris, how are you today?
I'm well. I actually ate before the show, so now I won't end the show in a state of emaciated starvation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. You're wearing a turtleneck, which I don't... Is that right? Is that what I'm seeing? It's nice. It's a nice look. I haven't worn a turtleneck in some time. My head's too bulbous, really. I think it just automatically stretches out. That's the whole problem.
Maybe bulbous or round, right, some might say.
Sure.
Interesting.
Well, that's Dustin Furman, our executive producer and other co-host of Sacred Symbols, chiming in. How's your life?
I'm doing good. I just got back. I was in the Virginia area for almost the past week now that I think about it. And so just back home, it's nice. The bed I sleep on in my parents' house is their old sleep number that they got like 20 years ago or something. Maybe not 20. And it's just like when you get back home and you get to lay on your own bed, you're like, oh, thank God. Like you're just like weren't quite comfortable.
Sure.
When you're traveling. And so it's good to be back home.
Good. Well, yeah, it was good to see you. You were here momentarily, and otherwise nothing really interesting going on around these parts. I'm trying to think. Is there anything? No, not really. Nothing really interesting happening.
Yeah.
Just
sometimes
same old
sometimes
shit.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
Nothing interesting needs to be happening all the time.
Right. That's true. I would argue nothing as interesting is happening in my life almost ever, but maybe I make it sound like a little more interesting. It's interesting to me because that's just what I have to deal with. Oh, I will give a shout out. Well, I don't know if he wants to be shouted out by name, but Richmond area contractor who's a listener of the show got in touch with me. He like flips houses and owns like a contracting company. And in one of these houses, he found like 20 or 25 boxes of video games that he's kind of like, he's kind of over it. Like he's seen the shit over and over again. And he was just saying like, it's just not even worth the profit of trying to like parse this stuff out or whatever. And I was like, I think that I know people that would really like this stuff. So I started going and grabbing it with Micah, and it's just like tons of original Xbox and PS2 games, like tons and tons of them. But the house isn't like horrible, like hoarders like shape, and a lot of really disgusting stuff. But some cartridges and old consoles. I gave a bunch of stuff. I'm giving a bunch of stuff to my brother too. So just a shout out to him if he's listening. Again, don't know if you want to be named by name, but very nice of you. And I'm gonna flip the rest of it probably just for GI Joes. So appreciate that. All right, let's see. Sacred Symbols Plus rolling on. More than 12,000 of you support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/laststandmedia. And one of your many perks over there is 2 now exclusive episodes a week of Sacred Symbols Plus. We begin rolling them out the week that this will publish on Patreon. So you will already have waiting for you a Returnal review discussion and story discussion that I did with Rick Hogue. I know he's been very eager to just talk games without his expertise being brought in. He did a great job. He's getting really good feedback on that show. And later this week, by the time you hear this might already go live. I don't really know. Maybe a little bit after this. I don't even know what the plan is. But Chris is going to do a mailbag of his own. I think we'll do a call-in show next week. I think we do Ratchet soon and all the rest. So we're going to keep rolling these shows out. Also, there's like a bunch of people that I want to interview. I know a lot of people are interested in being on the show. So I'm excited about that. Thank you for all your support over on Patreon and with merch and all the rest. As you know, Habroxia 2 got an update recently. So check that out if you'd like my game. Now let's start with a few corrections and comments and roll on into it, boys, if we might. Professor JJJ.
All right.
JJJ, what do you think that stands for, Chris?
J. Jonah Jameson?
Yeah, I would. Is that true, you think?
I don't know. It's the only thing that I can think of when I think of those letters.
Yeah.
Says,
hello, gentlemen. I have a small correction to offer on last week's show. During the discussion of Casey Hudson's new studio, Colin referenced his time with Microsoft, stating that he was head of Xbox while he was there. Actually, Casey never held a position in the senior leadership at Xbox, according to an Xbox Wire post at the time. Casey's title was Creative Director at Microsoft Studios. In that role, he reported directly to Kudo Sonata, Corporate Vice President of Next Gen Experiences. Casey's primary focus was the Creative Director of HoloLens Experiences. Oh, remember HoloLens? In short, Casey was primarily working on the Microsoft side of the firm, not the Xbox side. So thank you for that. Appreciate that correction. And the other thing I wanted to say real quick, we have a really important update from Big Squeak, who says, hey boys, just an update. I was the guy who said, why buy the cow when you get the milk for free in my work environment? And good news, I'm still gainfully employed and I have all the milk I can drink. Helps that I work there with my wife. Thank you. Thanks, Kyle. All right, good. I'm glad that everything's okay. We didn't quite know. It's like, I didn't know that someone, it's kind of like I take for granted our influence. I guess I can say anything I want on this show and someone's going to repeat it. So.
Anything.
Right. Anything at all.
Anything.
Yeah.
In fact, that term was used by another YouTuber speaking about Housemarque, and people are like, well, that guy clearly is probably a listener of Sacred Symbols. And I'm like, yes, he probably is. So you're welcome for that. The next term I want you guys to use in proper, everyday nomenclature is mommy milkers.
No. Please no.
Oh, God.
Mark Elfering wrote into us and said, I just want to say that Chris drank out of perhaps the largest bottle of water I've ever seen in my life. He's talking about last episode. I can't tell if this is part of his bit from the small man loving a large woman so all the objects in his room look humongous, or if the man has simply acquired a 5-liter bottle of Aquafina. That is all, gents. So I think he was talking about your Arizona junk, perhaps?
No. I did have like a. I wonder if I still have. No, I must have thrown it away, obviously, because it's garbage. But no, I picked up this really large Aquafina because I don't know. I like having a lot of water on hand.
Sure.
I don't like having like a small bottle of water that I'm going to be done with in like 20 minutes. And then all right. Like, I like having a lot that I can like, oh, I'm done for now. I'm going to put it in the fridge and like bring it back out. It's like, I don't know. It's just efficient for me. But it is a comically large Aquafina, especially because I am a small human being.
Right. Yeah, he was suggesting that it was like a scale issue.
It's a mix.
Yeah.
It is hilariously large, but I am also very short.
Sure. So. Okay. I understand. It's like the guys that used to film like the Star Wars special effects, like on the side of the truck, like zooming in on the little miniature, and it just looks like a huge Death Star. We can do anything we want with motion capture or motion video. So appreciate you writing in about that, Mark. Thank you for making us laugh. I want to return to Chris, if I might, to your turtleneck, just because I'm curious. You know what it's invoking in me? It's been on my mind. It invokes Steve Jobs. That's like what I'm thinking about. And it's been so long since he's died now. And I think that is his symbol. So that's what's on my mind.
Yeah. Well, he's back now. He's what a shameful reincarnation this is.
What are you talking about?
But I've been getting that a lot. The Steve Jobs thing. I did a stream actually a couple days ago where I wore this. I had my shades on and I combed my hair like Ringo, and I looked exactly like a 70s like music manager.
Nice.
Who was like really not like the guy who's like Bohemian Rhapsody. This is garbage, like and then he gets completely ousted from the industry for being
he gets owned and shamed.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let that go for now. But I did want to keep this in our ballpark here because Mark Grouch wrote in and said, "Hey boys, long time, first time. Colin, in the past, you've expressed a passing interest in building Lego sets. Now that there's a Seinfeld Lego set, will you finally buy in?" So I'm a little confused. Can I just generally go buy this now on their website? Is it like a pre-order or something? Because I've never dealt in the Lego. I see my Jamie looking it up right now for us. And
$80.
It's available now? Like I can buy it?
Hold on. Available August 1st, 2021. But Colin, you can be a VIP. Early access starts at $7.21. So
no, that's probably something you have to pay for, right? Because there's a similar thing on Hasbro Pulse for G.I. Joe toys, and it's like I'm not paying for that. That sucks.
Right. Yeah,
I'll pre-order, but I'm not gonna like pay you to pre-order. That's fucking bonkers. Yeah. So I'm gonna be in on that.
I saw this thing and I immediately thought, oh no. I might buy a Lego set. I don't give a shit about Lego. I've never bought. I had like the bucket, of like the big bucket of Legos that like were just generic bricks.
Sure.
But I never got any of the sets. Like the whole like, oh, here's a Millennium Falcon. Like I never had the patience or the meticulous eye for detail for that to even be something that would be an enjoyable like way to spend my time. But I might snag this thing. Just because, like, why would they make a Seinfeld Lego set 20 some odd years after the show ends out of nowhere? It's so bizarre.
There's some nice details in this set. Even me, who I know very little about Seinfeld, Kramer has a pretzel, which I do know that reference, and there's the pole for Festivus, and there's another there's the one guy who has a fishing pole and a baguette. I don't know if that's a reference.
That's Jerry getting the baguette, like reeling in the marble rye.
The marble rye.
Yeah.
So there's lots of nice little fan details in there. I can appreciate that.
It's very cool. I think it was part of some like proposal thing where you can like propose sets and then they, I guess, go through the trouble of trying to license them or whatever. And I think it's really neat too. So I'm actually with you, Chris. I had the jar. I had like the bucket of blocks. I actually liked wooden blocks a lot when I was a kid too. I like really loved buying, and my dad would actually make me like various wooden blocks. And then I got some Lego sets, like those early Lego sets before Lego was really cool. There was like just generic space Legos and medieval Legos. And then I would get some of them, and then they would just all get mixed together eventually. And it was just, they'd all just go in the bucket. So it was a complete waste. But Legos are really cool. They're just incredibly expensive. I think it's like unholy how expensive Legos are. And that's what keeps me away from dabbling a little more, if I can say so myself. All right. Well, thank you for writing in about that totally unrelated thing. Let's see what's next. Oh, Nick Himes wrote in and said, "What's up, CDC? What's your take on influencers and media types hiding their trophies and achievements? A handful of popular influencers and journalists have had their gamer scores leaked, and it's pretty ironic how few games these people play. Regardless of if you hunt for achievements or trophies, modern games have pretty easy lists. Do you guys think these media types are just talking about politics in games rather than playing them? I don't know about any of that, but I do want to ask, just generally speaking, how we feel about this. Is this a kind of a topic du jour, let's say, recently in the industry? Dustin, let's go to you first.
Sure.
What do you think about... Well, let me tell you what I think first, and then you can tell me if you agree. I really feel like it's got to be a balance. I think that part of the reason I am credible is because I play a lot of games, and I play probably fewer games than other people, but I play them much more deeply. And the trophy and achievement systems, specifically in our case, the trophy system, is just evidence of that. So you can see, it's almost like, I almost look at it as like some sort of CV. And I just hand it over and I'm like, hey, like, you're new to the show and you don't really know what's going on. You don't know my history. Like, this at least tells you some of what I've done. Here's a little resume. And so I don't think it necessarily lends credibility to a person or not, but I'm personally proud to have a list like that. And I think people are getting caught up on the difference between gamer score and platinum trophies, which I think is not relevant, and just having a beat of games that appear in your lists. And if you're hiding that, I feel like that's a little strange. You should at least want to expose that, I think.
Right. I'm a bit mixed on this overall, because I agree that if you're a public commentator, then I feel like as part of your job, then yeah, maybe you should keep these public. On the other hand, I don't think that it's useful for people to look at someone's trophies for ammo against them, because a lot of people in the industry, I mean, Colin, you know this, and I'm sure you agree with me. Colin is abnormal in that he only plays things on PlayStation.
Yes.
Most people play things usually on 2 platforms, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. Like, I play things everywhere. I play on PC, Switch, whatever, So if someone was to look at my PlayStation, there might be, I don't know, 2 weeks that I'm not playing a PlayStation game, or 2 weeks that I'm not playing an Xbox, if I, whatever. It's not indicative of just the only exclusive place that I play. I think it's a little scummy also to, this is again where I'm of two minds. I think it is scummy to go and try to use this as ammo against people, just because there's so many other factors involved. But on the other hand, I can appreciate and think that transparency in this is valuable. So just take it, take that as you will, and either support the people that you appreciate are transparent. And if you find someone that's being a hypocrite, then just don't fucking listen to them. Find some other person that you want to listen to, because, it just sounds, I see people getting attacked for this kind of thing. I'm like,
yeah, I actually don't know any of the individual people that are being attacked for this, mostly because I think it's not happening in the PlayStation space. And so I don't really pay attention to that. There's just not many people like me in the PlayStation space. There's like, and I'm not saying that in any disrespectful way. I'm just saying there are many more characters, let's say in quotes, on the other side. So It's like Mystic and me and just a couple others, Brian at PS Trophies. Like there's not many people that you're even going to be able to call out in that way. While on the other side, it seems like there's a lot more of those kinds of personalities I see. But Chris, I wonder if you feel like this interpretation is correct, because I agree with what Dustin was saying. I look at our show personally as being really good because it has 3 different elements. And I look at it as like a pie chart. I am the full pie, right? PlayStation. That's the PlayStation pie. Dustin is like the half PlayStation pie, where it's like half PlayStation and probably half other things. Nintendo, probably some other things in there. And then I look at your pie as quarter PlayStation pie. And you play a lot on PC, you play a lot on Xbox. And it's these different textures that I think add to our show. And so I actually agree with Dustin in the sense that the only way you can really gather a person's full breadth is if they're either like me, and so you just know exactly where to go, or you have like some sort of algorithmic way to say like achievements plus trophies plus game. Well, I was gonna say GameCube. On Switch, like playtime, I think is exposed. Steam, you can obviously see that very granularly. So what do you think about this whole debate?
Well, first of all, I think that is exactly what makes our show really fucking cool. But I do also think I think it's weird that anybody would hide their trophies, because it's not like I could see somebody being like, oh, I don't want people stalking me, but it's like, it's not really information that they're really like, it's not really harmful information that they could glean from just like looking at your trophies. So it doesn't seem like any volatile information could really be taken from a trophy list. So like, I just find the notion of hiding them a little strange and suspect, because I wouldn't even think to do that, you know, as a person in this space, or even as a person out of this space. Like I never once thought, oh, I got to hide my trophies or my achievements or whatever. But I can't remember how long ago this was. This must have been around the time that we did Doom Eternal, or that we played Doom Eternal and finished it, because I got a message from somebody who was like, you praise Doom Eternal a lot for somebody who hasn't played it. And I was like, what? And they like sent me like a screenshot of my trophies. I'm like, oh, I played on Xbox. and then he was like, oh,
I mean, that's just such a simple, that's the point, is like, that's the point. I'm glad you agree because that is the point. Like, it brings a breadth of different. So I agree with you, Dustin, too, that why weaponize this? This is stupid. Like, I do think that gaming is experiential, and the more you play, the more you're inherently going to understand and know. But I think that there are different things to bear as well.
Yeah.
So what is your shirt, Dustin? Why am I so fixated on everyone's clothes today?
Because
it looks familiar, but I can't. Is it Dragon Quest?
Well, here's the thing about this shirt. I have a shirt that has the exact same image on it from that I wore maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it was like a bootleg on Etsy, and it was kind of like shitty quality. And then I found this one when I was shopping in Virginia, and it's very nice quality, and it's official. So hopefully Junji Ito got some money from this one.
Because I was going to say, you're a little grainy on our feed right now. Well, not for the audience, but for me, just because it's for whatever. But yeah, it looks like the female lead in Dragon Quest 11 to me. And I'm like, there's no way that can be who that is.
No, this is from Uzumaki, which is a really fucked up graphic novel about spirals. So
cool.
No, check it out.
I mean, that could very well not even exist. All right. Sacred Symbols is sponsored by BetterHelp, and listeners can get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/symbols. Taking care of your mind is just as important as taking care of your body. Sometimes you can do a little bit of both at the same time, like when you exercise. But honing in on your mental well-being on its own is essential too, and therapy has the potential to be your arsenal's greatest weapon in this regard. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. And it's customization that really rests at the heart of BetterHelp, because in reality, therapy can be whatever you want it to be, broad and general or laser-focused or anything in between. And it can be, should be, and with BetterHelp is delivered in a format that's most comfortable for you. Whether you're dealing with motivational issues or depression and anxiety or a bad temper, or perhaps even problems at work or in your personal relationships, therapy is an awesome tool. And when wielded through BetterHelp, it becomes more useful than ever. Once you head to betterhelp.com/symbols, that's betterhelp.com/SYMBOLS, you can sign up and begin communicating with a therapist in under 48 hours. Millions and millions of people know what therapy is all about, and I highly recommend it. And I likewise recommend BetterHelp for its ease of entry, low stress, and customizable approach to something that makes some people ashamed but shouldn't. Therapy is for everyone, useful for all. So give it a try. Get 10% off your first month of therapy sessions at betterhelp.com/symbols. That's betterhelp.com/symbols for 10% off your first month of therapy. Now, boys, the thing that we're going to do now is there is a state of play happening. It's supposed to be about Deathloop and some other third-party games and indie games in quotes, whatever that's supposed to mean. So we are going to cut here and we are going to insert whatever's in that state of play here. I don't really think it's going to be very much, but we'll see. And I'm certainly interested to see more Deathloop, and I appreciate their honesty about what's going to be there and what's not. So we can talk all about that now. Okay, so as promised, we are here after we recorded the rest of the show, for the most part, to talk about the state of play that Sony just put on. I put on my PlayStation 5. I reclined in my brand new Lazy Boy and took some notes. So I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games, I think they showed. And according to my notes, and I have something to say, I think, about each of these, as I was saying before we even started. So I'm just going to throw these out in order and we can just ping pong around. And if we have something to say, we can. And if not, we don't. And that's okay too. And then at the end, we can kind of wrap up our thoughts about the entire 30-minute presentation. So Chris, let's start with Moss Book 2 announced for PlayStation VR from Polyarc, the studio that did the first one. I really liked Moss a lot. It's actually the last PSVR game I played. So I want to say it was in 2018 when I played it. And this was a really cool surprise and actually got me an audible, like, oh, like when they showed Quill for the first time, I was like, it's Moss 2. I know it's close enough. Moss Book 2. Does this do anything for you?
Yeah. I think it's wise to continue that. Moss was definitely one of the best VR games on PlayStation. And I think it's just like a really good game in general. I haven't finished it, but from what I played, it was like definitely like a bit of a cut above some of the other stuff, some of the other titles that I'd seen in the VR space. So it's nice to see this getting not another shot as if it like missed its first one, but like just another one of these is, I think, pretty good for PSVR as a platform.
Yeah, it was an unexpected way, Dustin, to begin the show. I didn't expect to see PSVR. I don't know if they said that it was going to be there or not. It's the only game I think they showed that is PSVR. And when they were showing it in the beginning, I was like, oh, is this a PSVR 2 game perhaps? But it clearly became, just from the aesthetic, I was like, there's no way this is a PSVR 2 game. But nonetheless, pretty exciting. Don't know if I'll actually get to playing it, but what did you think about this opening?
Yeah, it reminded me that I have always wanted to play this game and never have. So this is like a nice little reminder. But man, it's just this game is so cute. I love how cute it is. I love Quill. She is just adorable. And so I honestly think I want to play it mainly for that.
Yeah, she's a really likable character. And I was saying to Micah when we were watching, because she had never played it, that I felt like it was kind of exactly what I want out of certain VR, 2D VR, kind of, where you can look around and see around corners. And so it's just, but you still play in a traditional way. So it's not too much. It's not overwhelming as a VR experience. So we'll keep an eye out for that. I don't think they actually put a date on it. I would expect 2022, maybe later this year, though. I don't know if you want to get too close to the next PSVR. Dustin, let's stick with you. Ilphonic showed off a game called Arcade-A-Geddon, which is going to be in PS5, or I guess is presently in PS5 early access. Of course, Ilphonic is the studio behind, most notably, Friday the 13th, the game, which we brought up, maybe we bring up later actually in the show. Whoa, time travel. That came out in 2017 on PS4, and then PS4 console exclusive second party game, Predator Hunting Grounds. What did you make of this announcement?
It's funny just because we've over and over complained about games that are doing the multiplayer, free-to-play multiplayer with cosmetics and how much they look like Fortnite. And I saw this and I'm like, well, this isn't as bad as other games as far as the I mean, it is and it isn't, but it's at least changing it up. And then the gameplay, I was like, yep, this is Fortnite. Like, to a T, like you have numbers like bursting out of enemies as you shoot them. And I'm sure the gameplay is very different. Like I'm rewatching the trailer now and there's like in the one shot, there's like kind of a sports element where like you're shooting a ball, and then there's a guy with a bat later on. But some of the weapon stuff, I'm like, oh, and the way that all the equipment bursts out of characters is like, pulled exactly from Fortnite. So I mean, this one I'm willing to check it out. It's out on early access today. So, but I'm I don't know. I'm not sold.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of this one. I'll go deeper into it, but Chris, let me throw it to you. What's your take on Arcade-ageddon?
My take is when I say that, hey, PlayStation needs more multiplayer stuff, this isn't exactly what I'm talking about. Like I feel like we have a lot of these weird, and there are some of these that like really kind of burst through the mold and actually do something really cool and unique and interesting. I think of that dodgeball game that's not called Dodgeball that bothers me. I can't remember the Rocket. No, what the hell is that game called?
Knockout City.
Knockout City.
Yeah.
Like I think about that one and I'm like, oh, that's a really genuinely a great multiplayer game because it's so weird and different, and even just the style of it, and there's a lot of tech skill in that game that like I wouldn't have expected there to be. Maybe that's the case for some. Oh, there's a fly. Ooh. Maybe there's a. I got genuinely mesmerized by that. I was like, wow. I don't know. I just feel like it's it looks. I don't want to say it looks like Fortnite because I feel like that's like like such a generic criticism of a lot of things. But like there were moments in that trailer where the over the shoulder perspective, the way guns fired, and the way characters were moving around, the way like you talked about the equipment kind of like bursting out of the chest of or like all these different like loot pools. It does look a lot like Fortnite in certain ways, but maybe there's some tech skill here that is worth checking out. I have very limited experience with IllFonic as a multiplayer studio. I didn't jump into Predator Hunting Grounds because I just heard that it was never stable. I assume it's probably more stable now, but I'll check this out as long as I don't have to pay for early access, I guess.
I didn't even look to see if it's. I doubt it's for pay. Although they did that with Dreams, and that annoyed everyone. But
yeah.
So I'm reading the PlayStation blog post that they posted for this, and I guess it's good news and bad news as far as this. So I'm just going to read verbatim what it says here at the top. It says, and it's from Jared Gerritsen, who's the head of creative and design at IllFonic. He says, "I sat in Scotland with my heart in my stomach during our Christmas break. 2020 wasn't a kind year to anyone, but the news that the game our team had been working on for the past year was no longer moving forward had just been shared with me. This seemed to be a very fitting end to an extremely hard year. That was not even what bothered me the most. Games are canceled all the time in our industry, but this one was different. We had the mechanics to a solid game, and it was fun. The IllFonic management team and I came together, determined to save not just our game, but the larger team. Once we agreed the fun we had created was going to live on and we were able to publish it on our own for the first time, I sat down and cranked out the concept for Arcade-ageddon during the last 2 weeks of the year. The game was my answer to the frustrating question, how do we fight for our place in this universe? And at the same time, it was also an answer to quarantined life." So I bring this up because for two reasons. Number one, it doesn't sound like it's IllFonic's main project, which is good news because I don't mean to be rude and I say things all the time. And I especially don't want to be rude and come off flippant because honestly, I'm good friends with the vice president of the studio. But this game, I don't know that a game like this has much of a chance. It just doesn't seem. There's nothing. I guess we brought up Knockout City or whatever, and that game does seem to have an audience. But they're saying here, and he says, "How do we fight for our place in this universe?" I don't think you do fight for your place in this universe because this isn't where your head's usually at. And I'm concerned about a game that was worked on and whatever that means for a year and then canceled, and then he put together the two ideas just 6 months ago. Now the game's in early access. So I'm just wondering what the nature of this project is, if it's even something that's going to see a full release. And it's certainly not my kind of game, but I was just kind of relieved to feel like this can't possibly be the project that they're working, like the primary project they're working on. But maybe I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's my takeaway. I like the idea. I will, to be positive, I like the idea of like an arcade that's in jeopardy and you're fighting over it and you're fighting around it, and it's cool, but it's just, yeah, it didn't do anything for me. Another game that didn't do much for me was Tribes of Midgard. Let's stick with you, Chris. This is an action RPG. Comes out soon, July 27th. 2 modes, all multiplayer kind of, or both multiplayer related, session and survival, 8 classes. the thing that really got me about this was that the woman doing the VO didn't know how to say the word saga. And I don't understand how you can put someone into the VO booth that doesn't know how to say the word that you're going to have her try to say 15 to 20 times, and not one time will she say the word saga right. And it got to the point where I was actually saying the sentences out loud after she was saying the word saga incorrectly, because I'm like, is it one of those weird sentences where you just can't say it right? And I was just saying them. I'm like, it's not that hard. So that's my biggest takeaway of the Tribes of Midgard. What did you think?
There's a lot of questionable VO in this in this state of play in general, I noticed. But yeah, I it's not a game for me. Like, I know that right off the bat. Like, okay, it's like an isometric survival thing. Like, I like very few isometric games, like mainly the Supergiant games, like stuff like Bastion and Hades, and those are really the only ones in that mold that I ever really got into, aside from, like, some tactics games, which are like inherently that way. But I think this looks kind of cool. Like, I like the art style of it. I like the how not overwhelming the skill tree seems. I like how approachable it looks. Although the fact that this is the first time I'm hearing about this game, and they're already talking about like season 1,
Yes.
That was something that kind of put me off a little bit, because I'm just learning about this, and maybe that's my fault. Maybe I'm not paying enough attention. But it just post-launch support is good, but it's not necessarily the way I want to be introduced to something, because it makes me feel like the thing's not done. And like, we'll be expanding the classes later on, and it's like, okay. One of the things that is most approachable about this is how simple the classes seem. So, like, maybe I'll enjoy this for the first like month, until this new season starts to, throw an insane amount of shit at me. But I thought it was charming. I thought it was like, it's a nice looking game. It's just not really something that's going to grab me. And I knew that going in. So it's hard for me to judge it in that way.
Yeah, it's to your point. I'm looking just at the PlayStation blog post, and it's like season 1, then season 1 mid-season update, and then season 2 and season 2 mid-season update, going all the way out to early 2022. And I've been complaining about this since we started our show. I remember making fun of the Division 2 at E3 that year, because they were like, we're here's our plans for, and I'm like, the game's 6 months away. I don't even give a fuck. Why don't you prove yourself first, and then we can see this. But I understand that it requires people to buy in some way, because they know it's going to be a time commitment. I do like that the game can be played alone. I like that it does have some, I guess, tower defense things going on in it, which is neat, but I don't know, it's not for me. Dustin, what do you think about Tribes of Midgard?
I'm not as sold on the art style as Chris is, but that's totally subjective. The thing that my gut reaction is that, like, they plan out this months and months of content. I'm like, this doesn't look like a game that you play for months. This doesn't look like a lifestyle game. But who knows? Maybe it's super fun, and it is the type of game that people want to be their go-to, kind of like, Destiny 2 or something like that. But I don't get that feeling from the trailer. But this one, I'm watching it, despite not being into the art style. It could have a really fun, this is a late night Discord game for me, where it's like with a few other friends hanging out, and this is just like you're BSing and playing a game where you're, beating up some dudes. So
yeah,
beating off some dudes, maybe.
Beating up. Maybe.
Sorry, I just had to say it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's 2021. It's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong.
Now, the next game, now we're getting into something I think is somewhat interesting in this game, Forged in Shadow Torch. And is that what it's called? Yeah, I think so. I think I have that right? Yeah. Fist. And this is an interesting game because it comes from TI Games. It's published by Billy, but TI Games is a Chinese developer. And this is one of the games you might recall that Sony went and got. Not in a second party capacity, but they're helping to expose these Chinese made games in mainland China to a wider audience that otherwise wouldn't have them. And we'll talk later on in the show about things that are ominous coming out of China, but this is good. And so I like this. And the game is described I was just looking at its Steam page. It comes out on Steam as well, the same date in September. It says Forged in Shadow Torch is a Metroidvania action game featuring exploration, intense combat, and challenging platforms. You play as like some realistic looking bunny. I'm pretty into this. What do you think, Dustin?
I'm looking at the PlayStation blog. The only thing I'm bothered, it says designing Rayton, the iconic rabbit protagonist.
Yeah,
this is like easy with the word iconic with a before a game comes out. Like
something tells me this is not going to be an iconic character, but that's okay. It doesn't mean it's going to be a bad game.
Well, it's, the first sentence, it says it all came from the basic idea that an outstanding iconic protagonist helps players love and remember a game. And we believe Rayton, the rabbit and fist forged in Shadow Torch, is a great example of that.
Okay. Yeah, who even knows? I'm not trying to be an asshole either, but who even knows? Like, the person obviously speaks English, but maybe they're just not using the
right.
And also Billy is a the publisher is also a Chinese entity, so they might not be working necessarily with even any native English speakers, for all we know.
Right. But yeah, I think despite that, I do think he looks cool, and I like the overall feel and look of this game. It's definitely, unique for sure. I saw, dude, when they brought that, there's a girl character. Is she also a rabbit in there? I'm like, man, I can already see the fan art now.
Oh man, that's what we were talking about when we were watching it downstairs. That's exactly. I was saying that they're not fuckable enough. Like and to me, it was like,
does it matter?
In the sense that what I mean by that is that it's too realistic. It doesn't seem like it's sexy enough. But then Micah was like, I assure you that there's something's gonna happen with this.
They put the gloves on this character. They know.
Yeah,
they fucking know. They're here for it, and that's fine. But no, it's cool. I think it's cool that it's like it looks like super, like the graphics are really polished looking, and it's a 2D game. Kind of sort of along the lines of Oddworld, where you have this really like high production 2D game, which I think is cool. So
the 2.5D aesthetic is neat. It is a Metroidvania. I think it looks great. Chris, what do you think about Fist?
Fist. I think it looks all right. Like I like the vibe of it. It reminded me of Biomutant immediately, although I know it's not.
It's funny you say that when they were showing it at first, I was like, oh, this is the Biomutant PS5 port. That's what I thought for a few seconds.
Yeah, that's what I thought for a second until they started talking. I was like, oh, there's voice acting. It's not Biomutant. But I think it looks neat. It reminded me a little bit like once it got into the gameplay, or it did remind me a little bit of Oddworld. It reminded me a lot of actually Shadow Complex a little bit in the way that it was in the 2.5D. I know it's it's ancient, but at this point, but
hell of a game.
I don't know if I'm super into it in the sense that I'm excited to play it. But it's a game I'll be watching. For sure. I think it'll be a really interesting game to pay attention to, especially like when it comes out and like how it charts and like, this is a pretty cool thing to have like Chinese made actual like art in our ecosystem for the first time. And
indeed, and we'll have one more to talk about in a little while as well.
Yeah.
I believe. All right. The next one is, I think, by far the worst game in this bunch. And it is Hunter's Arena Legends. Now, I was looking up on... This is one of those weird things, by the way, that's frustrating to me. I remember complaining about this at IGN, Demon Souls, where it's singular plural. It's singular possessive, rather. So it's demon 'S. And this is the same thing. It's Hunter's Arena, but it's like HUNTER''S. So I'm like, it's just one Hunter's Arena. All right. So it's by this company, Mantisco. It has a mixed reception of 61% positive on Steam. And I think my only takeaway with this one, well, there's two things. First of all, it's going to be free on PlayStation Plus. So we know that August 3rd. So don't even buy it. Don't even bother. But I just felt like this was... they weren't talking about the game very well. It was really weirdly worded. And the name is just so bad. It's just so bad. What do you think, Chris?
It's the most generic thing I've ever seen, which is weird because there were elements of it where I thought it looked okay. Like there's like a snippet in that trailer where it shows like two people fighting, like just two like one-on-one, And I thought it did look kind of neat. And the premise of like exploring in a 3D environment and then kind of like running into somebody else and setting up an on the fly kind of like 2D like arena, or not 2D, but like, you know, like a like establishing a fighting arena anywhere in like a big open map. That's kind of cool. That's like a neat premise, actually. But the whole time I was listening to this, I've just constantly felt like what's interesting about this game and the experience that potentially is there is being continuously undersold by the VO and the writing and just like the name. And the second I saw like, oh, you can have wacky skins, I immediately was like, fuck, that sucks. Because before that moment, I thought it actually looked aesthetically interesting. And then the absurd, the rubber ducky, you could have a rubber duck. And it's like, it just it becomes another one of these cacophonous, just disgusting things where it's just, oh, hey, here's a game with like, do you guys, are you familiar with Rainbow Six Siege? You know that's like a Tom Clancy like military style thing. That was how it looked in the beginning, and then you play it now and people are running around with jigsaw masks, and it's just I think a game's aesthetic is genuinely like super important, and because it establishes an art style and like just like an identity, just that's just beyond like the game mechanics and the gameplay. And when you have things like, hey, here's this really cool like kind of weird battle royale fighting game, and it's like, oh, it's kind of cool. And also here's rubber duck skins and fucking pumpkin skins and then it just becomes like it just becomes another one of these. So like, I don't know, this bothers me because I think the actual premise of the game actually is interesting, but everything else about it makes me want to stay super far away.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you say that because, and Chris, I'm sorry, Dustin, I'm curious to get what your take is on this. It did seem to me another one of these games where it's a MOBA, PvE. I don't know what the hell. It's like, how many more of these? Like, it doesn't seem inspired at all. It just, what do you think?
Yeah, it's weird because when I saw it, I'm like, this looks like Black Desert, like the way the character models looked. And then lo and behold, it's another South Korean team. So it's like interesting that South Korean games apparently have like a shared, at least these two games are both Korean teams and they both look very similar. But yeah, I think what Chris said is actually exactly what I was thinking during the trailer. I was like, what does this bring to the table here? Like in some ways I was like, the combat's kind of interesting. I don't want to say the meme where it looks kind of Souls-like, but I was thinking like, okay, an action combat based battle royale, that sounds somewhat interesting, but I'm not liking the execution that I'm seeing in the trailer. And this is one of those things where it's like, man, with the game already being mixed on Steam, I'm like, is this dead on arrival on PS5? Like,
presumably,
I don't know. Yeah,
presumably it is. A game that I don't think is dead on arrival is Sifu, which has been delayed and was originally slated for the end or towards the end of 2021 and will now come out in 2022. Dustin, let's stay with you. What do you think about Slow Claps? Slow Clap is a French studio. They're Chinese-inspired brawler here. It looks like this game looks great.
Yeah, I love certain games you can like really feel the hits. And this game just looks like, I hate to use this word also, but the combat looks visceral. Like, you really, there's people getting thrown around and the punches hit hard. So, yeah, I think it looks cool. I didn't really play their last game was, is it Devolver published it? Also a hand-to-hand combat game.
Oh, no.
I know Absolver.
Oh, Absolver. That's right. Yeah, I actually bought that not so long ago.
Yeah,
I didn't play it yet though.
So yeah, I every time I see this game, I'm like, this looks cool. I'm in.
Oh no, this wasn't one I bought. I'm making that up.
I think it was on PS Plus.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so maybe you're right.
At some point,
did publish it. Okay. Yeah, I think this game looks cool. Chris, what do you make of Sifu?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the obvious one that we will get to at the end, I thought this was the best game that we saw. Like it looks polished. I like the art style a lot. I like the premise. I like the idea of like your character getting older and and fighting through these like big, like these like really intimate like hallways and arenas, and just I agree with Dustin with the meme compliment where it's like it does look visceral. Like it reminds me a lot of not that this is even remotely comparable in any broad sense, but there are like certain fight scenes in like Splinter Cell Conviction where it just feels like you didn't need to be this brutal, dude. Like it feels like really painful to like watch, and it looks like it just looks satisfying to play. I'm really excited to get my hands on this. It's one that I've been paying attention to for a while. Disappointed that it's delayed, but obviously that's not going to hurt it. It's gonna, if anything, it's gonna make it better. So I'm looking forward to this whenever the hell this drops.
Yeah, I would assume Q1 2022. They talk in their write-up about COVID obviously interrupting them, and I'm sure it did. The next game up for me, and we can stick with Chris on this one, is Jet the Far Shore. Now, this to me is, I think, the best game shown at the show. At least the one that's most interesting to me. I had the most to write about it too. First of all, non-violent. Love that. Love that you can't fight. Like, so even if you're under attack, you need to figure out ways to kind of evade your enemies. It's calm. Gave me like a Flower-like vibe. You guys remember that game back on the PS3? Yeah. And it is obviously this kind of No Man's Sky-ish sort of thing, but much more contained, lower, I think, production value, but it takes advantage of this sense of wonder. And Super Brothers, this is their first game in almost 10 years. In fact, it's their only other game. They did Sword and Sorcery, obviously, with Capybara back in 2011, 2012, depending on the platform. And so this was the game that I really walked away from being most in awe of, I think. And I think the thing I liked most about that presentation was I just loved the way they talked about their game. Seemed like, unlike some of these other, you could tell that everyone submitted their VOs, right, in their gameplay, and Sony put it all together. And you could just tell that this was the most thoughtful approach, and I feel like this game has the most potential. What did you think, Chris?
Yeah, I definitely appreciated the way that they delivered the VO and the way they described it. It felt the most genuine. Like, it felt like genuinely like, we made this thing and we think it's pretty cool and we hope you like it. And, our team, we started in this form and now we're here and it looks pretty cool and we hope you like it and all that. And I genuinely appreciate that realism, especially like following stuff like Hunter's Arena.
Yeah.
Like, like it
Legends.
Legends. Another fucking just word that's just being slapped on the end of everything. It's definitely like, this is a game that I feel like I would appreciate more than I would enjoy playing. I need stimuli in a way that's like, I need to be fighting something to be like thoroughly entertained. So like these exploration focused things like Flower and Journey, and like I can appreciate these games, but they're definitely not the games that I would associate most with my preferences. But I really like the art style of this, and that's a big deal for me. So I think I probably will jump into this, especially just because I like the, first of all, it reminded me like the ship in the beginning, like reminded me of Wipeout. So I got like a little like, ooh,
yeah,
Wipeout ship.
You know what game it reminded me of too was Race the Sun. I don't know if you remember. You guys remember that one.
Yeah.
But it gave me. I played that on Vita. It gave me a little bit of that vibe too. What did you think of this, Dustin? Does this intrigue you?
It does. I'm somewhere between you and Chris, though, in that sometimes these more exploration games I can be really into, and then other times I find them kind of boring for my taste. So this one has me intrigued. I'm also not as hot on like muted color palettes in games anymore, which this game seems to be kind of in the middle, because like I'm looking at a screenshot that's like bright red, and then other ones are much more toned down. But this is one that I'm interested in, and I think it's cool to see a developer like Super Brothers. They have this like huge game with Swords and Sorcery. It was like known on iPhone in particular. That game really was like known as like, if you're gonna play a game on your phone, this is like one of the best. And so to see them go from that to this is very interesting to see them evolve in that way.
I agree. And I think there's just something that speaks to the OCD man in me, similar to trophies and other perks of games, where once in a while I like kind of not necessarily non-violent games, but just cataloging games where it's all about just creating a bestiary. It's all about creating a spell book. It's whatever. And you're just kind of adding to it. And I dig that. It reminds me a little bit. It's a random reference, but there was a game on Wii that I kind of dug called Endless Ocean. It came out probably in 2007 or maybe the beginning of 2008. And it was literally just like going into an ocean, like looking for fish and stuff like that. Or the early PS3 game Africa was another game like that, where you are just kind of cataloging, photographing, and interacting. I don't know, because one thing they said is even more interesting is there's no resource management in this game. So I'm really interested to see like how it all works, because it's both non-violent and non-collecty. So I don't know. All we know is that this game comes out PS4 and PS5 this year. Let's stay with you, Dustin. We knew this was coming, but Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, the Hinokami Chronicles, comes to PS5, I think PS4 as well, October 15th. Now, Demon Slayer's huge. I mean, I don't know much about it, but I know it's a manga and an anime, right? And
yes.
We've never gotten we've never gotten a game over here. So explain to me what's going on here, because I know that this was exciting for folks.
Yeah, I've not watched Demon Slayer, but they recently just had a Demon Slayer movie that was huge here in the US, and like, man, whether you like it or not, bitches, anime is mainstream now. Like, I was walking around at a mall in the DC area, and like so many of the stores I went to, I'm like, man, anime is just like dominating everywhere more and more. So, man, these anime games though, usually not very good, but it doesn't matter. They always sell millions and millions of copies. This one in particular didn't look particularly great or bad to me. But I'm curious what Demon Slayer fans think of it. Just because, I mean, I recognize some of the characters. I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I need to watch the anime though. You know, it seems like it's something I should do as the resident weeb.
Yeah, I mean, I live with a weeb, and she said the same thing. She's like, oh, after she saw the trailer. So I assume my confusion about this, Chris, is, and I was reading about it, is they're describing it as a fighting game. I don't know if that has a new definition. Is it a fighting game like Power Stone is a fighting game or something? Because it just seemed like a 3D kind of small arena fighter, but I don't know if they were just showing us a piece of it. But does this do anything for you? It comes out in Japan on my birthday, October 14th, by the way.
Not particularly. I wanted to be torn apart by horses when the dialogue started.
Yeah, of course.
And it was just like the most anime I've ever. That was like the heaviest dose of anime I've received in a short amount of time in like years. So I didn't have a good time watching this, but I'm sure it's for somebody. It actually reminded me a lot of just the aesthetic of it, and like even just the perspective of it and the way that like fights happened. It reminded me a little bit of Naruto Rise of a Ninja, which was like a 360 game from like 2007 that I got from Gamefly. I remember it. And, you know, it was fine. You know, it was definitely a video game. This is just not my wheelhouse at all. Like, so there was no chance that this was going to be something that was ever on my radar. But hopefully Demon Slayer fans enjoy it, and it's, it's worth their time.
My big thing about this, or not a big thing, it's just an interesting observation for me, is this game wasn't supposed to come out west, and Sega didn't fund this game. They came in and they're publishing it. So it's kind of neat. We don't see Sega do that too much these days. But let's go back to Dustin for this next one. Lost Judgment, we saw more of. Ryuga Gotoku Studio, the sequel to Judgment, the spinoff for Yakuza. What did you think? I mean, this is really tempting to me, because I always say I don't want to be a poser, but
right.
I don't know. These do look fun, and the goofiness of it is very appealing to me too.
Yeah, it's interesting in that I don't know. They wear their goofiness on their sleeve, which I appreciate. This trailer was highlighted. You know, the guy's skateboarding it and then doing like, there's like a dance routine in it as well. And I'm curious about the fact that since, this is made by the Yakuza team, they recently said Yakuza is RPG only and that Judgment is now their brawler, action game. So it'll be curious to see how they diverge at this point, with them at the same time being so incredibly similar. But, there is that the PS5 version of the original for Judgment is either out or coming out very soon. So, Colin, that might be a good time for you to check it out and see if it's something you're interested in.
I might just do that. What did you think, Chris?
I actually thought it looked pretty cool. Like, I was confused about it at first because I was like, this has to be Yakuza, right? Like,
yeah.
And I only knew it was Yakuza the second the mini game started pouring in, because that was like, it's such a clear hallmark of that series that even I'm familiar with. I think it looks cool. It's definitely something that I'm curious enough about that I would consider jumping into it. Like, it just looks so off the wall that I can't help but be kind of a little bit attracted to it.
Let's move on to, and this is why I'm bouncing back and forth the way I have been. We're back to staying with Chris here. Death Stranding, director's cut. We have a date, PlayStation 5, September 24th. Now, there is some news here. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I think it just came out in the PlayStation blog post, and I've been seeing people tweet about it. $10 upgrade you have to pay to get it from PS4 to PS5. So not a free upgrade. Another one of these weird moves by Sony, I think. But nonetheless, I think it looks quirky. We gush about this game, but I think this game's really great. And it's cool to see it again. And it's cool to it just seemed like they've actually added quite a bit. So I'm not even sure that I'm that mortified by a $10 upgrade. But what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think it looks like they've genuinely added a lot to it, which is a little concerning to me because I thought the game was already a bit long. But it looks like the stuff that they added is genuinely stuff that makes the game better. I'm curious about these guns because, like, part of what was so cool about Death Stranding was the fact that it was so unlike a standard video game, and just having like, hey, here's the parts of that trailer that were like, here's a new gun, was just like, okay, like, that's not really where the interesting things are for me in that game. But I'm not upset by this. I don't know if I'm particularly enthused enough to jump back into it. It is a very long game, but it is also one of these experiences that I think is worth having at least once. Death Stranding's a weird game because it's hard for me to recommend it to people because it's so unique and so specific and so bizarre and so, opposed to traditional game design in ways that, like, you really have to be open to a game like this to really enjoy it. And will a lot of these new mechanics and these new things, like that weird racing thing that they added, like, will these new additions make it easier for players who maybe wouldn't have been into the original because there's more stuff, or will it be more overwhelming? Will it be more confusing? It's hard for me to say because I played the original and, I had a good time with it. I'm glad there's a new version with more shit because it's a game that deserves a lot of attention, a lot of love, I think. But I can't say that I'm super stoked to jump back into it, especially, you make a good case in the sense that, like, they've added enough to justify a $10 prize or a $10 price hike, but not for me, who's, I think, extracted as much as I can extract from Death Stranding.
Fair enough.
But for new players, yeah, totally. Like, I would suggest this.
I agree in the sense that I won't be going back, and if I do, I'd go back to the PS4 version just because I want to get the platinum. I think that would be a cool platinum to get. But Dustin, what do you think about Death Stranding Director's Cut now that we've seen it? September 24, a bunch of new additions. Are you intrigued?
Yeah. In fact, this is one I definitely want to go back and play through this again. And I'm looking through the blog post right now, and the thing that's sticking out to me right now is they explain, like, some of the expanded content and stuff. And I just want to read this line here. The new content isn't simply bolted on either. It's been carefully woven into the core game experience and will be made available through discovery as you play. And then It goes on. which is cool. I like that. It's a little weird. That's like, it's not simply bolted on, which last week Sony announced the Ghost of Tsushima, which is like a separate island. So it's almost like talking shit about that, but not really. It just seems like a weird way to phrase it. But I think it's cool that it's woven in. That's exciting. They talked about some of the specific PS5 features, like a 4K, upscaled 4K and up to 60 FPS or a fidelity mode. And then some stuff like adaptive triggers, which this game, when I was thinking about, I'm like, adaptive triggers would be cool because then, you can have the resistance. I'm like, that actually would probably be really difficult if you're like holding packages for like minutes at a time with your fingers at full resistance on the controller. That might be a little taxing. You're gonna have to work out your fingers
for sure. I wonder also if I could play this because Chris said, showing some new weapons and all of this. It did feature to me. I don't know that I fought anything in the game when you didn't have to. I don't think I, like when you run into like these random groups of people, I just like never ever fucked with them because the combat didn't seem like in many Metal Gear games, the combat just isn't very fun. So I like driving around and kind of getting to where I was going and all of that. So props to Death Stranding. I think Chris is right though. It's just a game it's hard to necessarily recommend. It's the same way I feel about Returnal. I just think you have to know whether it's for you or not. And sometimes you won't know until you play it. Mm-hmm. All right, finally, let's end with Deathloop. We know it's coming September 14th. This game looks great. I really, really think this game looks phenomenal. It feels like Returnal and Hitman. I was actually kind of taken. I don't know why I never thought of it. Maybe it's because we've played Returnal now, but the theme is like almost identical in the main. It's like you're just getting revived until you figure it out. Like you're just getting revived. You're going back. It's using the PS5 to get you back to the beginning. It feels a little bit samey in that way. But apart from that, you can really see, this is of course being made by Arkane owned by Bethesda now owned by Microsoft, but you can see the Dishonored DNA all over this game now that you've seen it being played. And it also introduces this almost Ratchet-like Nexus movement with the hook shot, which I guess is what's keeping it only on PS5. Because I was looking at it, I'm like, what is making this a PS5 only game? But it is a PlayStation 5 exclusive. And it reminded me of almost the old school feeling of what the term Battle Royale used to mean, like the Hunger Games style, where I like the Juliana character. I think that's her name, Julianne, where she's hunting you as you're hunting others. It's very cool, very meta. Chris, what did you think of what we saw of Deathloop?
Oh, I loved it. I think it looks so good. It like you said, you brought up Hitman, which is what I was going to bring up too. Just the idea of like, hey, here are these different targets, and like you eavesdrop on conversations to learn about like new ways to get like the jump on them. And it's like, I was not expecting that from this. I was expecting more of something like a Ghost Runner, where like the whole point was like, hey, here's like a linear path, and your goal is kind of like to get through it in ways that are almost like to master the speed run of it. That's the kind of vibe that I got from previous trailers. And this is like Dishonored and Hitman with like, I like the way that there are like notes written on the walls with like light. It reminded me of again, Splinter Cell Conviction, actually, the way that they displayed your goals with like lighting. I thought that was like really cool. The teleport move is right out of Dishonored. And
oh, totally.
Yeah. The one thing I was like a little bit like confused about is like they didn't the weapons, like the guns, I wasn't sure what each of them really did. Like they all seemed to be just kind of like, every gun seemed to be the same gun. It didn't really seem like there was much variation there, although I'm sure there is like when you actually play, and they just didn't get it across that well. But dude, everything about this looks cool. I love the aesthetic. I love the vibe. I like the music and the tone of it. The gameplay loop looks awesome. This looks so cool. And it's, by the way, the closest I'm ever going to get to a fucking stealth game. So so I'll take it.
I did dig it seemed like a complex Hitman, like in some way, or at least a faster Hitman. Hitman's pretty complex. Maybe that's the wrong word. But Dustin, what did you make of Deathloop and what we've seen of it? Does it scratch an itch for you?
Yeah, it does. I'm not concerned. I'm just curious on how it's going to work out. I mean, we saw a nice little dive here, but the thing for me that's interesting is that it is like all the stealth mechanics from Dishonored are there, and at the same time during this trailer they're like blasting everybody. I'm like, this is, to me, it not broke my brain, but I was like thinking about, I'm like, this, I'm looking at this level and like in my mind thinking about how I'd play it like Dishonored, but I always play Dishonored as stealthy as possible. But this game seems to really encourage the use of weapons. You're changing out weapons all the time. And, that may not be a bad thing. I was just thinking about, I'm like, this is really, it's really similar to Dishonored and totally different at the exact same time. And so I think that overall for me, that's a net positive just because it's a new type of experience, which I'm always looking for. The only other thing that I'm skeptical about, which I don't want it to sound like I'm just trying to be negative, because I actually pretty much agree with everything Chris said, just, to balance out some perspective. As far as having the other character hunt you, this is a mechanic that is in other games that I used to think sounded really interesting, but anytime it's implemented, I find it annoying. Like in Dark Souls, if I'm trying to get from point A to point B and someone invades my game, I'm like, fuck, I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm on a mission to do this, and I get it. That's the point. But at the same time, it's like, is it going to annoy me in the moment when I'm like getting real close to beating something and then, someone snipes me? And again,
yeah,
maybe that's the point, but that doesn't mean I would appreciate it.
That is the one aspect of it that I'm not super ecstatic about. Everything else, everything that surrounds it looks superb, but that is the one aspect of it where I'm like, because they did something similar with Doom Eternal where demons could invade your game, and I was like, I remember when I started, it's like, oh, do you want to opt into this? And I remember being like, no, like I want to play Doom. Like right. I don't need some asshole coming in to pour lava all over my Minecraft house, and just fuck with me. And the same thing is actually, like, since you play Destiny now, Gambit, which is like a whole game mode that's designed around, you and your team are collectively like, getting some moats together, and then bam, some invader's coming in and he's going to screw you over, and you're just going to feel really shitty because you got killed when you were about to like win. Right. It's a really iffy mechanic. It sounds really cool on paper, but like in practice, I've never really enjoyed it. Hopefully this is something that you can not opt out of, because I know that there's an AI takes over if no player is present, but I would prefer that. Like I'd prefer an AI. I don't want to deal with some dude who's like doing trick shots and like making a goddamn montage of my failures. I don't. That's like my worst nightmare, especially in an FPS game. Like, God, please don't show that to anybody.
It's funny that you brought that up, because they did say specifically that the AI will play as the raider. So it seems like it's a part of the game, and I can't help but love the meta of just hunting as you're being hunted. It's just, I think it's really neat personally. The outside thing, industry level thing I just wanted to bring up were two things. First of all, Redfall, which we talked about, it's obviously an Xbox exclusive game. I feel like it's kind of similar to Deathloop, like not in the way it's played, but just the way it looks and moves. I feel like the games are now beginning to share a sort of Dishonored like Arkane's games are starting to share a Dishonored like feel, which I think is cool. If you really remove the Wolfenstein spinoffs and that one-off Prey game, they have a kind of a style that seems to be developing, and I think that's pretty neat. And I think Redfall looks super dope. But the other thing that I wanted to point out was just that feeling of playing something that feels a little new. I don't know that I've ever played anything like this, and I love that feeling. Like I said earlier with Jet, I love non-violent games, of course, but this is the antithesis of that. Obviously, violence is found everywhere in gaming, but it just feels like a different kind of violence, and it feels a little bit like an ode to IO in what they're doing. And I dig it. I'm excited about it. I'm sorry. Did you have anything to say, Chris?
No, I agree.
The one thing to wrap things up, and we can throw it over to Dustin and Chris on this, is I just continue to be flummoxed by this use of the word indie. And I went and looked on the PlayStation blog State of Play post that was teasing the State of Play, and they used the term third-party games and indie games. And I just, again, what game in here is indie? What is it? Tribes of Midgard that has a season pass, or is it Hunter's Arena, which is already on PC, or Demon Slayer, which is a huge I mean, what is the indie game here? I'm saying that just because, but even these other games are being brought, like Sony is involved in bringing a game like Jet here, so or not Jet, rather Fist. Jesus Christ. But maybe there is more to this than I think, more to the sexuality than I think. But I wanted to bring that up because we would talk about indies, right? That was a theme last week on our show because a lot of indies were complaining. And this is what I'm saying. There are no indie games here. Not in the sense of what the word means. These are all $1 million plus games. And frankly, I don't know that, I don't know, maybe Fist would be the cheapest of these games. I can't imagine any of these games being made, marketed, and brought to market for less than $1 million. So that's just, and I think that's being very generous. To put that in the context, like games we make are made for like nothing because we take money on the back end. I'm just saying that the indie stuff, that indie nomenclature needs to be fixed because I now understand more than ever what the fuck people are talking about. Like there's no indie games in this mix. So just wanted to throw that out there. But Chris, let's wrap it up. What did you think about the overall presentation?
I thought what I liked, I very much liked. And while there were things that didn't catch my eye in particular, I don't necessarily think that's a point against the show. It's just, not everything is going to be tailored to me. I think Hunter's Arena and Tribes of Midgard are the standout, not so impressive titles, but everything else I thought had a place. Arcadegeddon, we'll see. Moss 2 is a nice surprise. Jet looks beautiful. Demon Slayer fans have something. There's a new Yakuza. There's, Sifu looks fucking fantastic. Death Stranding news and Deathloop. I think it's a pretty, I think it's a pretty solid State of Play. Like as far as like variety and as far as the stuff that I'm personally interested in, I found myself more engaged with this one than I have in previous ones.
Dustin, what say you?
Yeah, I feel like they set the expectations right. And so I was overall pleased with everything that we saw. There's a couple head scratchers like for me, the biggest head scratcher is Hunter's Arena. I'm just like, I don't know what's going on with this game. But I like these, as long as they set the right expectations, these little mini bite-sized things are cool. As long as they're in between, I'm always gonna love the big events, that like this rumored August event that has been pushed. I'm always looking for that. I'm looking for the very exciting moments, and this was all just good.
Yeah, I think. Well, again, we're time traveling because I think later on, Dustin, you bring up the quote about expectations kind of setting up for the thieving joy or whatever the fuck it is, and so. I feel like that said, they surpassed my expectations. I was like, this is great. These games are great. And maybe it's just quietly chugging along like this is the right way to go until they have something really great to show. I was actually I don't know why, because they were going to say, they did say they're going to show it in a few weeks, but I was even surprised to see Death Stranding because we saw the PlayStation Studios logo because of that. So that even was a step too far. And even without that, I was totally fine with this showcase. And I thought, they stuck around on every game just the right amount of time. And I agree. The big miss here was Hunter's Arena, which is whatever. By the way, I wanted to point out Tribes of Midgard is being published by Gearbox. So that explains the season pass. Okay. Or the season approach, I should say. Okay. Yeah. So that's it. Let's jump back into the show now. Woo. Oh my God, boys. Deathloop. I can't believe they made it into a JRPG. That's crazy.
Deathloop. This is for the thumbnail for later. Like just like that. Sorry, audio listeners, but we're very excited.
Yeah. All right. We had more to say about that. I have no idea what we said about it. Okay. Just a few other things, guys. OLED Switch. How cute. Chris, I thought I would ask you what you think about this. We had an OLED, of course, handheld 10 years ago that everyone wanted to shame. And now it's all the talk of the town. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I don't see the point. And make no mistake, I do think OLED is just a great display. Like, my TV is OLED. I love it. I think it's like a far superior screen than most other screens. But like at the same time, it's like, how long ago did the Switch come out? What is this, 2017?
2017.
It was like March of 2017. So it's been 4 years about. And the newest model after 4 years is just an OLED version with a wider kickstand. And guess what? We finally got a LAN port in the dock. Something that, the Dreamcast and original Xbox did. So I don't know. Like, it's a really underwhelming new SKU of a machine that's been out for 4 years already. I think there were a lot of rumors percolating about like a Switch Pro, because of course there would be after so much time, I think it was about this amount of time into a console's life cycle that we got the Pro and what is it, the Xbox One X, I think. Right?
I actually think it's even late for the Switch to have a new version. In that regard.
So I don't know. Like, OLED is cool. If you don't already have a Switch, I guess I would suggest that this is the one you get, because OLED is a better display, and these are nice little accoutrements that like should have been in the first version of the Switch anyway. But I'm not gonna run out. I'm not gonna get trampled on Black Friday for this thing. Like, I'll wait until they got something for. I wonder if they don't even see a point in making a Switch Pro, because they have all these like cloud versions of games like Control, and like there's this other one that I keep forgetting for some reason. But maybe they're just like, we can use the cloud to like boost performance on games that can't run natively on our console, so we don't need a stronger version. I don't know if that's what they're doing, but
could be.
I'm thoroughly underwhelmed as somebody with zero expectations.
Dustin, what do you think about this? I first of all, I'm in pretty much complete agreement with Chris, just in the sense that it was kind of funny to watch the meltdown, just because the rumors were so persistent about what was about to happen. And I thought it was kind of cool, to Nintendo's credit, that they were like, well, the dock can be purchased separately, which is neat. But Chris is right. The Dreamcast had a phone port on it, and the Xbox had an Ethernet port, and it is pretty funny that this is like the next revolution. They still don't have achievements, which I can't fucking believe, but I think that's got to be intentional at this point. So I don't know, Dustin, what do you think about what's going on with Switchland?
So my theory, and I saw this floated around, so I'm not the first person to think of this, is that the issue with the rumors was that I think that the rumors got mixed up, in that I'm guessing that Nintendo, the rumors that we're hearing about are about the next Switch, like Switch 2, that is still probably decently far off. But it's not unlike Nintendo to refresh a hardware a year and a half or 2 years before a new version comes out. But something I was thinking about, this is about a different product, but a YouTuber, a really big YouTuber, MKBHD, he does like tech stuff. He, in a recent video when he was talking about iPads, said, expectations are the thief of joy. And I thought, if no one had any expectations about what this Switch should have been, no one would have been mad. People would just been like, oh, cool, an OLED option, and it's coming. That's cool. I like my Switch, or I need a new one, or I don't have one at all. This is a great new option. And I think that it may be a little underwhelming, but not like, this like burn down Nintendo moment that we had a few days ago. So
yeah,
that's something to keep in mind here. It's just like, people got to be careful with rumors. But I mean, at the same time, is some of the blame on the journalists from Bloomberg and other publications that publish these? It's rumors, so you can always hide behind that. But at the same time, it's like, you're Bloomberg. That's a pretty big publication to be making that kind of post.
Yeah, it's in some way, we certainly can't sit on in our high tower here being like, well, can't talk about rumors and all that. We talk about rumors all the time. I mean, we just haven't engaged in hours probably at this point of blue balls about what that could possibly be. And it's fun. And I agree with you. Expectations are the thief of joy. And yet it's not unusual for us to expect certain things out of companies, right? Like, I like that Sony sets expectations with these states of play, yet we should still expect that they have much more to say about other games. You can have it both ways. So I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting just because I think they're further and further isolating themselves from being able to get games that are not their own games, stable of games, which are going to be limited and have been somewhat limited. When you really look at it, Switch's first party output is not like extraordinary. I think it's been buttressed in a great way from the bottom. And you want to make sure that you can continue to support that. And to Chris's point, like, you have these weird versions of like cloud control and Doom at 30 frames barely and all of this. But I mean, eventually this is just not going to work anymore. And they need to, if it matters to them, they need to figure out a way forward. I just don't know if it matters. I agree, though, also that these probably got mixed up. But it is the fault. Like, I don't know who, I actually messaged someone on Twitter about this because I'm like, I don't even know who got it wrong because I don't pay attention to Nintendo stuff. But apparently people ate shit on this one. So beware of who tells you what.
I mean, it's just the expectation of the industry, though. Like, this is how this generation in particular has so happened to have progressed. You know, like 4 years into the cycle, we get like a slightly stronger version of the machine. And granted, Nintendo has never really done that exactly. They've had like revised hardware. They've had, like, especially with handhelds, you know, they consistently would just here's a DS, or not here's a DS, but here's a Game Boy Advance with a backlight.
Right.
It's not any stronger, but feels significantly different. And you know, here's a DSi, whatever the hell that was.
Yeah, I was all over that thing. It was matte. It was awesome.
Yeah,
I have no idea
and
why I bought it.
Yeah, and the 2DS and all these like weird like variations of hardware that aren't necessarily stronger hardware. So like maybe in some way there could have been some understanding of like how Nintendo would have handled this if you just look back at their history of like revising handheld hardware. It's just a matter of like, I think because the Switch is such a weird machine, I don't mean to like spend so much time on Nintendo, but I think because it's in this hybrid space where it's like it's kind of a console, it's kind of a handheld, and we have this expectation of current consoles, but we have Nintendo's history of handhelds. I just think people didn't know exactly how to predict this machine's like evolutionary path, and I think now we know, okay, handheld. They're going the route of handhelds, which is like, here's a OLED screen, here's, you know, they're doing the backlight on the Advance again. And it's it's cool. It's
very
fine.
well said. Very well said. Yeah, it's funny to think that they have always been iterators of their own hardware. NES had an iteration, SNES had an iteration. N64 had a ton of iterations, although the form factor didn't change. There was just an asinine amount of them. You could buy an N64 in like any color you wanted. It was pretty cool. And then, so on and so forth. Fun. Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color. Like you said, Advance, Clamshell, DS, DS Slim, DSi. Yeah. Very well said. All right. A few other things I wanted to touch on before we get into what we're playing. Just letting everyone know, PS5 has a firmware update. Don't know if it's actually mandatory or not. It might have already downloaded for you automatically, but just something to keep an eye out for. It's just a stability update. And Chris, what's going on with Destiny on August 24th? Survive the Truth is the tagline. This is for is it the Witch Queen? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going
Halo?
on?
That's the same tagline?
No, but you know what's funny though? Like for Halo 5, there was a Hunt the Truth marketing campaign.
It sounded familiar.
Yeah. I don't know what this is. I mean, I assume it is like some kind of showcase for the Witch Queen, which I think is actually delayed. It was supposed to be this fall, but I think they pushed it to like January or February or something like that. But I don't know what this is. I'm excited for it. I've been into Destiny for a very, very long time, and the story's finally ramping up to a point where it's like narratively like really satisfying to follow. So I'm all about whatever the hell they're going to show here. But again, they're being pretty vague about it intentionally. So don't have much else to say other than I'm looking forward to it. Also, yesterday was Bungie Day, actually.
Oh.
Which is why they announced it yesterday.
Very fun. Dustin is a newcomer or a newer. Is that fair to say? Intermediate?
No,
I mean, I don't know what to call you.
I'm just inconsistent. I'm not as consistent as Chris. I come and go with Destiny, but I was there day one on Destiny 1.
Okay.
Just back and forth. Bad relationship you keep coming back to. But it's starting to get good, honestly. It's starting to get real good.
I'll tell you what. Good. Well, we'll obviously have much more on that in August. So that's like 6 weeks or 7 weeks from now. Dustin, what did you make about this whole Titanfall hackers situation going on with Apex? And,
right.
I'm curious to know your take on this. Tell us what's going on and what happened, and what you think of this, because I'm pretty fascinated by this situation, and it seems like it might have actually backfired on the people that were trying to do stuff.
I'm a little light on the all of the details, just because a lot of this was going down on, was this on 4th of July? Actually, the day. So they went on a holiday, which is like kind of rude. But so to my understanding, Colin, is the hackers aren't happy about the fact there's so much hacking in Titanfall 2. So they went and hacked the game and Apex to have like a message that was like, please Respawn, fix this game. And it's an interesting way to get your message, but I mean, it's loud and clear, and it is unfortunate. I think that one of the points that the hackers made was like, Titanfall 2 is still for sale. You're selling this game and it is unplayable with the amount of hackers. Fix this because you are doing really bad business. And that's it's a pretty fair point.
Yeah, there was a message from, I guess a lot of the fear came from like a tweet from some tech lead at Respawn that was saying, he was literally holding his baby nephew or whatever when they got a message saying that they had to go into the office to fix the game, and that it kind of like ruined their vacations and all of that. Chris, what do you think of this? I'm totally sympathetic to that. I just, again, no one should be doing shit like this, these DDoS attacks and stuff. It's totally fucked up, which is what's ruining Titanfall, as I understand. But I just feel like you shouldn't have a game for sale that, and like, how can you let a game break down like this? And not just pull it at some point.
Yeah, I'm of a couple mindsets with this. On one hand, this is the thing that they had to do to get this problem acknowledged. Like I can assure you that there's been probably like a ton of like forum posts about like, hey, Titanfall's unplayable, what the fuck, or like, hey, there's a bunch of hackers here, I'm sure there's like a bunch of Twitter threads dating back for a while, for as long as this has been going on, and nothing's been done. So it's like, all right, well, I guess we gotta do something to get some eyes on this. At the same time, it is an inherently kind of dickish thing to do. So like, I actually don't know where I fall on this situation. I kind of see literally every angle of this. It's, but on the same time, like you can still purchase like Modern Warfare digitally, Modern Warfare 2. And that is those old Call of Duty games, like anything older than 3 years old, as far as Call of Duty goes, is like rife with hackers. Like, it's hilarious. It's like people are flying. It looks like Destiny. People are flying around throwing like planets at each other. It's just the dumbest shit I've ever seen. And you can still buy those games, and they don't, they're not pulling them down. And I agree that something should be done as far as like, keeping these games stable and like making sure there's a team like monitoring like how they function at some point. But I don't know. This is a tricky situation. Sucks for pretty much everybody, because the fans of the game don't get a stable game, and the people working on it get it and the people working at the company that has moved on from it at this point just gets like a really shitty thing that they have to now like get on their hands and knees and fix again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I agree with you. You can see all angles of it, but I just continue. I'm a pretty nonviolent, like pacifist person in all ways. I feel like force isn't going to fix this issue, but it does seem very unsavory to just let these games persist. And like you said, a lot of these games are broken. I know that it's all just about staying one step ahead, and eventually they're just breaking something. You're fixing it. They're breaking it. You're fixing it. They're breaking it. And at some point you're just like, fuck it. But that point of saying fuck it should be the point in which something is removed, I think.
Yeah.
For sale.
I guess that the conversation that probably happens is, okay, so if this game is rife with hackers, but you like it a lot, not enough people play it and not enough people put money into it for us to dedicate a team to consistently work on it and consistently monitor it. So either there's probably a conversation where it's like either you play a game that has a couple hackers in it every once in a while that we leave up for the people who play it, or we shut the game down entirely and then nobody gets to play it because that's the most cost-effective thing for everybody.
Certainly.
And I bet that's a conversation that happens. So I don't know. It's unfortunate.
Well, we'll see if there's anything more to be said about that, but I doubt there will be. That was kind of a
flash in the pan.
Yeah, an ephemeral story in our space. Just wanted to say also, it's been revealed. First of all, we know The Last of Us is filming for HBO now, but it has been revealed, just in case people are curious, not a huge surprise, but the first season will have 10 episodes. So I wanted to let everyone know about that. I think it's pretty interesting. Not much more to say. I don't know. I'm skeptical about that, but we're going to see what goes on. Robert Foxgrover wrote into us, though, and said, hello, C and D and C. As usual with these posts, I'm a longtime listener, first-time patron. Here's a fun idea. What is a bad game or IP that you have played that you would most like to see be remade into a better product? Thanks for your consideration and hard work. So I thought this was a very serendipitous thing to ask, and I don't know if you guys have any answers, but I do, in that it was recently revealed, and I'm just reading Push Square right now, Sammy Barker over there, cult PS3 serial killer Naughty Bear makes unexpected Dead by Daylight cameo. So you guys might know Dead by Daylight as an ongoing sort of survival multiplayer horror game that came out on PS4, I think back in 2017. And it's made by Behavior Interactive. Now, back in the day, you might remember that Behavior Interactive was known as the studio Artificial Mind and Movement. And they made a very, very weird third-person action game called Naughty Bear that I really, really loved. And it's about a bear, a stuffed animal that is an outcast and simply murders all of the other bears that are around him as they're having fun at parties and festivals. And it's really great. But the game was just like kind of half-baked, and there was like a 1.5 sequel and it fucking ran terribly. It was like a frame rate mess, but it was such a neat idea. And so I thought it was funny that they're bringing him to their game, Dead by Daylight, as a playable character. And it reminded me, I'm like, man, I feel like Naughty Bear can live again. I feel like this is a really cool IP that could be revisited. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them and a shout out to that game, and appreciate Robert writing. And Dustin, is there any answer to this question in your mind?
I mean, the thing that came to mind to me are some of this is already halfway happening. Like, you think about some of these horrible full motion video games like Night Trap, but they went and remade it, and it's like really awesome. Like, it's horrible. It's not fun to play, but it's really fun to play, actually, because of how like much of a time capsule thing. And then just at E3, they announced they're re-releasing the game Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, which is like a legendary Angry Video Game Nerd episode, if you guys haven't seen that. So they're like re-releasing it on PlayStation 5. And I'm just so excited. I guess his argument was taking something and making it into a good version. But I know sometimes bad things can be good in their own bad, entertaining way. So
say that again. Chris, any thought here on what might come again?
So I when I think of bad there's not a whole lot of bad games that I can think of, but there are games that I think were either a little middling that had like a really strong foundation or concept or idea that I think could be made into something that's genuinely awesome. And I think of like some of the older kind of middle market or like the later generation middle market pandemic games, stuff like Mercenaries 2 didn't run well. Like, it wasn't like a particularly high quality experience. It wasn't like a great story or anything. But Grand Theft Auto as a mercenary, and you can like call in bunker busters and just demolish cities and like play with your friends and like, oh man, I just called a nuke on you. You better fucking get the hell out of there. There was like a chaos to it that was genuinely fun, and with like the right amount of polish and like modern hardware, I think Mercenaries would be sincerely awesome. But that wasn't really a bad game so much. It was just like some like, it's like, okay, middling.
And it's from another EA era when they were cooler than they are now.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I feel like another game from that era, a little later, but actually contemporary to it, that I feel like actually would be like an awesome game for them to bring back is Army of Two. I feel like that game was just a little early. I feel like now is the time for an Army of Two game. And it's funny you said pandemic, like a pandemic game, because when you said that, I was like, pandemic game, oh, like a game was made in the pandemic. And then when you said mercenaries, I was like, oh, that word pandemic games is going to have a totally different meaning now. It's a good thing they don't have that studio anymore. They would have had to rename that thing.
Yeah. Whoops.
All right. Before we get into what we're playing, finally, like 40 minutes into the show, Andrew Single wrote into us and said, "Greetings, fellas. I'll keep it short. I found out my wife is pregnant. After what video game character should I name my child?" Chris?
Oh my God. Birdo.
Right. Good.
Name your kid Birdo, whatever it is. It's a girl or a boy.
Well, that's the whole thing with Birdo, right? Back in the day. Isn't that literally the thing about Birdo? Was like he is a transsexual in the original instruction manual.
Is he?
I'm gonna look this up. Dustin, give us your answer. I'm gonna look this up. I think it's true.
Well, you're onto something about that. There's definitely some not confusion. Maybe, I don't know. There's multiple narratives there.
I thought it was just androgynous.
Could be. See, I was gonna say L Block, but then Chris already came in with a funny one, and so now I feel like I'm telling the worst joke after Chris. So Gordon Freeman. I don't know.
Don't the Tetris pieces have like actual names?
You know what? You might be right about.
Because I remember I remember hearing this, but like I just sort of believed it without questioning it. But now I'm
okay. So I'm going to come in here real quick, and we're going to clear up the Birdo thing. In the Super Mario Brothers 2 USA, so Super Mario, cheap version, but I love Doki Doki Panic. It says this about Birdo: he thinks he is a girl, and he spits eggs from his mouth. He'd rather be called Birdetta. That's the whole description.
Oh, so
Nintendo way ahead of the curve here. No disrespect in there. No shaming or transphobia. That's all it says. He thinks he is a girl and he spits eggs from his mouth. He'd rather be called Birdetta.
Oh, okay.
Whoa. Okay.
So
progressive for Nintendo.
Yeah, very progressive. Very progressive. They wouldn't have gotten away with that in Japan, I don't think.
No.
They probably did.
Now, Chris brought up the Tetris block names. He is right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the NES or the Game Boy. Here are the names of the Tetris blocks. Ricky. Oh, wait. Orange Ricky and Blue Ricky. Those are the two L shapes. Cleveland Z and Rhode Island Z. That's for the two different Z shape.
Interesting. So, dude, you name the kid Ricky and then be like, what did you name your child? Ricky, is that like does that have some significance? Like it's it's one of the blocks in Tetris.
Right. Well, here are the three best ones though. The line is Hero. Okay. The T is Tiwi. And the square is a Smash Boy. I'm thinking Smash Boy. That might be
Smash Boy is awesome.
Yeah, that's a good.
Andrew, so his name's Singo. Smash Boy Singo. Let's go.
I was gonna say Monokuma, but I like him naming the child Ricky instead. Ricky. Also, Master Chief, I think would be a good name for a child. Oh. Congratulations to you, Andrew. All right, let's get into what we're playing. Chris, it says you're playing Ratchet, Tetris Effect, and Metro Exodus. So talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, still going through Ratchet, still liking it. I think I'm at a point where I can safely say the next time I play it, I'll be pretty much done with it. Tetris Effect is just something that I've been picking up. I've actually been playing this pretty consistently. I just keep forgetting to mention it, but I've partaken in some of the Devil's Lettuce and played some Tetris Effect, and my God, it's so good. It's such a relaxing experience in that state. It's so cool.
It is. It's a wonderful game.
Yeah, it's really good. Even aside from that, I love Tetris Effect. Like that's a game that I wish was like more portable. Like I don't know if it's on Switch. I feel like it isn't, but it should be. But Tetris Effect is fantastic. I recommend it highly. And Metro Exodus is something that I'm still kind of like dabbling in. I can't get over how good looking it is. It's really the PS5 really does that game a lot of favors. Like as far as like the atmosphere and just the way it feels to play, the 60 frames, the consistent frame rate, the lack of stutter, the great LOD, and by now it's like way patched. I remember when I played it the first time, the sky glitched out on me, and it was like half lit and half dark, so it was like a bit like, ooh.
Is that intentional?
I don't think so.
Fucked up in Russia.
It's like the oceans. It's like when the oceans meet, and there's that weird, like, obvious dividing line.
Yeah.
No, but I don't have a lot different to say about these games. I just they're all really good, I guess, is all I can really say. And Metro Exodus is something that I genuinely think if you might have like dabbled in it on PS4 and you got a PS5 now and you're thinking about maybe giving it a shot, I would say give it a shot now, because it's definitely the best version of this game that we've got. So
yeah, it's on my mind. Like I said last week, because I platinumed the first two, I just never got to this when it came to PS4, and then it's just I want to play a shooter. Like I'm really eager to play a shooter, but I'm trying to get through my games first. I'll talk about it in a minute. But Dustin says here, well, obviously I saw you were traveling, but
right.
It says here you're messing with Xbox game streaming. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was gone. Basically, I left last Friday and I got back yesterday. So I was gone the entire time. All I got in was a little Mario Golf on the road. But while I was at my parents', I had some downtime. I'm like, hey, now's the time to check out this Xbox cloud streaming, get a little opposition research in, see how things are going, since this is such a big thing. And let me tell you, it's fucking horrible. Like, absolutely terrible. And
oh boy.
So here's what I was thinking. I was playing from my MacBook via Wi-Fi, which is an advertised way to do it. They're like, oh, tablets and phones also. I'm like, okay, I'll do it from my MacBook. And I checked my parents' speeds, fantastic speeds. And it was so laggy and so bad. And I was like, surely this is is this a local internet problem? So I booted up, I got into my Stadia account, dusted that bad boy off, and booted into Destiny 2. Totally playable. Like, very good experience checking out Destiny 2 on Stadia. So I was talking about this in our Discord, actually. I was like, what's everyone else's experience? And I can't confirm this, but someone said it's very dependent on how close you are to one of Microsoft's servers. I was like, I don't know. It would be weird that the DC area would be a dead spot, but I just could not believe how bad it is and how much people are pumping this up on Twitter. It was like, as far as lag, I don't know. I should have booted up the PC or Mac version of PlayStation Now just to compare.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering if it was just as bad. But let me tell you guys, game streaming, it's not here yet. Stadia is the closest one so far, but it was just bad. It's just an interesting thing to see all the commotion about it and then get that kind of experience.
It's just, there's no way you can be anywhere in Northern or Central Virginia and be far away from something that would run that. I mean, it's just a huge population center. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Not my area of expertise. We will talk more about streaming later in the news. Before we move on, I guess I'll talk a little bit about what I've been playing. I'm still messing with Scarlet Nexus. I'm keeping very close eye on the clock, which you have to like leave the game for it to stop. And I do. So I'm about 20 hours in. I'm still on very Tales of Exilia, like you pick one of the two characters. It's really cool. It's getting really convoluted. It's very anime, but I'm drawn to it. I think it's fun. And I do recommend people keep an eye out for it. We will do a specific Sacred Symbols Plus episode about this in the coming weeks. I'll either do it by myself or we'll draw someone else in that has played it as well. And then I also wanted to give a shout out. I finally downloaded and started playing Doki Doki Literature Club. Now, I have two PS5s and one is in my bedroom. I almost never use it. And I downloaded Doki Doki Literature Club on it. And when I go to bed at night, I've been playing a little bit of it. And actually, Rob Cavazne wrote in and said, "Dear Colin and the boys, I started to play Doki Doki Literature Club based off of the Big D's high praise. 3 hours in and the weeb nonsense is killing me. I haven't gotten to any twist yet, so I'll keep chugging along, but it got me thinking. What is the last game any of you have played based solely on a recommendation? With the power of the internet, it's hard to go into things blindly like we did in the past. It has been kind of refreshing to play a game while knowing so little, even if it's uncomfortably weeby at times." So I totally agree, and this is a game that I played due to others' recommendations. And I know that something fucked up things happen, but I'm waiting for it as well. Like, it is very normal in the early hours. One thing I'll say about this game, and I don't know if you guys, I know you guys both played it on PC, so I don't know if it did it at this time, but I'm sure it probably did. It tells you over and over and over again that something fucked up is going to happen when you start it. And I was telling Micah, although it would be very unwise probably, and they could maybe even get in trouble, I don't know, it would have been much funnier for them to have just not said anything. And I'm sure that that's what it was in the very beginning. But, and I know you guys have said this has been memed to death too, and I actually don't know those memes, so I've probably seen them and don't even understand what they are. But I just feel like it would have been so much cooler. And I guess I wish that I had gone even more blind, because the reason I'm going in so-called blind is because people are like, no, you got to play. It's not what it seems. But I can only imagine, like, it would get an M rating probably, and that would be hysterical. But you'd not really otherwise know what the hell. And I still don't know what's going to happen. So am I getting close, Dustin, to some sort of twist here?
It's hard to say. I saw that the Plus version has a lot more content. And so I don't know if that's like in the more normalized section of the game. This is actually one I think I'm going to probably buy and play this weekend. I meant to pick it up last week, actually. I think I missed. There was like a discount, and I bet you it's not there anymore. Whatever.
Yeah. It was 10%. I think I got it, but nothing to write home.
Yeah,
about.
Nothing big. It's no big deal. But this is one of those things where I want to say this a really weird comparison, guys. Don't kill me for this. It feels in a way, the way I remember it is it's like a Tarantino movie in that it just builds and builds, and you're like looking around like, okay, when's it gonna happen? And then, flickers of weird things start to happen. You're like, oh, what's gonna happen? It will build. It's worth it. It's worth the build up for the eventual explosion.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's cute. It's not that much to keep an eye. I like the protagonist is like, funny. He like kind of hates these girls, but he's also kind of like, infatuated with them. And yeah, so we'll have more to say about that soon, and I'm excited about that. But I'm more excited indeed to get into the news. So let's do that now.
Let's do it.
Number one, during last week's show, we spoke extensively about PlayStation's acquisition of longtime second-party studio Housemarque, which it now fully owns. We learned that discussions between Sony and Housemarque began at the beginning of the pandemic and executed upon after Housemarque's newest game, Returnal, launched on PlayStation 5. Now, however, we know that Sony was competing with other suitors. An interviewer with a Finnish website, yle.fi, asked Housemarque's founder, Larry Kutinen, if there was more acquisition interest. His answer was candid, quote, "The usual suspects, major players in the field from China, Sweden, and the United States were interested. I have to say that there is a very special spring behind us, and the fact that we have been competing even feels a little surreal. In our discussions, it became clear that Sony wanted to buy us because we are doing something that others are not doing. Their starting point has not been that we would start making games according to a formula defined by Sony," end quote. As noted by website The Game Post, references to China and Sweden are almost certainly references to Tencent and Embracer, respectively, who are obviously both incredibly active with studio acquisitions. The American company, however, is more unknown. Could it be Microsoft? Housemarque, which began working on its own games for Sony, beginning with 2007's Super Stardust HD on PlayStation 3, was founded in the 90s and is best known for the aforementioned Super Stardust, 2010's Dead Nation, also on PS3, and PS4 launch game Resogun from 2013. So, Chris, let's start with you. It seems like Housemarque had other suitors. It's unclear what the deals were. It's pretty obvious who the Swedish and Chinese interests are, so we don't have to really go there. But do you think that Microsoft was the American suitor?
I don't know. Like, I think part of me is like, if Microsoft wanted to buy Housemarque, they probably would have just got him, because they have so much money that I don't imagine. Maybe they probably wouldn't have overpaid in the same way that they would have paid for Bethesda, because obviously Housemarque doesn't own nearly as much valuable IP as Bethesda does, and that's, fair enough. But I think it's possible that it's more maybe an Activision thing, or are Activision EA American? They're American, right?
Yeah.
They're not like European, right?
Yeah, they're both located in California.
I could see them maybe like possibly being like, "Hey, what's up? You're a Sony kind of adjacent property. It'd be really cool to have you." I have no doubt that Microsoft was possibly interested. I just don't imagine that they fought particularly hard,
Yeah,
I could see that being a case.
Yeah, I was kind of, I don't necessarily disagree. I was thinking that too, that it could have just been one of the big publishers. It could also have been a smaller interest as well. We don't really know. Housemarque is not, I mean, they're a great studio, but I don't think they're not commercially acclaimed, really. I mean, they have critical acclaim in the Sony ecosystem. Dustin, what's your take on this, that Sony kind of shoot away other could-be buyers?
Yeah, well, Chris brings up a good point, because instantly I thought, yeah, it's definitely Microsoft, but you'd imagine that Microsoft could come in with a larger dollar amount, but sometimes, sometimes it's not always about dollar amount. They're used to working with Sony, and they made it clear in that interview they wanted to make it known that Sony came to them and said, "We want you for what you're making now, not to turn you into a Sony over-the-shoulder third-person action game studio." So yeah, it's good to see though that there was competition. I guess it's just a feel-good story for Housemarque after they had gone so, there had to have been some scary times between the most recent, the Returnal, and the one before Matterfall, just because they were like fucking around with Battle Royale and stuff like that. And so, but yeah, good for them.
It is
overall.
It's kind of funny though that because you mentioned, it's like, yeah, we don't want you to make we want you for what you're doing right now. We don't want to turn you into another third person over the shoulder action game. And it's like, they just so happen to buy them when they just naturally did what Sony, what people would have assumed Sony would have made them do anyway. It's kind of amusing.
Right.
But, yeah, you're probably right.
It's just the whole Sony Housemarque marriage the last few years is interesting, because I said last week that I feel like my opinion on Sony having kind of saved Returnal has changed. I feel like Sony might have made that game into something more, and clearly did with their time, effort, money, and insertion of story and all of that. And I agree with you, Dustin. I mean, it was pretty trying. Nex Machina was basically Housemarque's only fully published game. It failed. It totally scared them away from the scene. Sony's money from a second party capacity kept them alive while they were making this Battle Royale, which I guess entered some sort of or was going to enter early access, and then Sony kind of came in, I guess, with more money and got Returnal out of them. So I don't know. It's very interesting.
Dude, Nex Machina, so good. If anyone out there in the audience hasn't played this game and you're enjoying Returnal, I like Nex Machina more than Returnal. It's just pure, which I think that's Colin, what you talk about, the sadness of them not doing arcade anymore. And that's like, man, I'm so sad that game didn't do better, because it was so fucking good.
Yeah, Nex Machina was weird to me because it was really good to play, but it didn't go far enough. Like, there's this pocket for me personally, there's a pocket of Housemarque game where, like, first of all, Nex Machina is really hard. So when there's and that's fine, but when a really hard game relies on a multiplier as its main core, it's kind of dissonant. Like, you want the feeling of holding the multiplier for long periods of time, and Nex Machina just doesn't allow you to do that. It's not the same as like in Stardust. When you lose your multiplier, the game's basically over because you can't possibly get a high score. And that's the kind of stuff I like. So I was a little surprised by how shallow it was, and was disappointed that, in my opinion, that was what scared them out of the space after they made all of this other stuff. And my hope for them, and it's a naive hope, but my hope is that they just are able to make, Media Molecule had a small team that made Tearaway. And it's like, why can't Housemarque have a small team that makes those games? They still no doubt have people that want to make those games.
Yeah.
And even though they're like 100 strong now, and the team that made Resogun is like a fraction of that, take those guys and let them go make another game. And they're not needed here. And you can hire up and make your whatever the fuck it is you want to make next. So we'll see what happens with them. But congratulations to them again. And we won't be hearing from them for a while now, I don't think. Number 2. Oh boy. The future of arguably Ubisoft's most important brand is weird. According to an extensive update posted on Ubisoft's official website, 2 Ubisoft studios called Ubisoft Montreal and Ubisoft Quebec are collaborating on the next Assassin's Creed game. And it's not going to be a standalone game per se, nor is it anywhere close to being finished, though that comes from other sources. For now, here's what the letter says in part, purportedly penned by the 2 teams' respective leads, Natalie Bouchard and Christophe Duren. Quote, after both Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Valhalla shattered records, we find ourselves in that very moment where we know that decisions we're making for the franchise now will impact its future for years to come, ellipsis. We wanted to share some key updates on the talented and creative minds that will now be working in a collaborative cross-studio structure between Ubisoft Montreal and Ubisoft Quebec that will guide, grow, and evolve and define the overall future of Assassin's Creed that includes an important upcoming early in development project codenamed Assassin's Creed Infinity, ellipsis. This change means we're also evolving with the video game industry. The pandemic and working from home have fundamentally changed the way we produce games, giving us a moment to reflect on our organization. Rather than continuing to pass the baton from game to game, we profoundly believe this is an opportunity for one of Ubisoft's most beloved franchises to evolve in a more integrated and collaborative manner that's less centered on studios and more focused on talent and leadership, no matter where they are within Ubisoft, end quote. So, just what's going on? According to a report from publication Bloomberg, Ubisoft is planning to make Assassin's Creed a GTA Online-like live service title that allows smaller stories delivered more regularly from more sources. This is a major change for a series that, when launched in 2007, was all about single-player, straightforward functionality. With 12 mainline games stretching all the way back into last year's Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is still slated to receive new updates itself, Infinity could ultimately be the final Assassin's Creed game ever. Riley Brewer wrote into us and said, "Hey boys, with Ubisoft's news that they are going to turn Assassin's Creed into a platform where the world continues to evolve and grow, even adding in new worlds and time periods to explore, what other single-player games do you think could take on the platform format? You've spoken briefly about the benefits for a multiplayer to switch to a platform like Call of Duty, but interested to hear your thoughts on single-player games. Do you think this is the future of AAA single-player games with the ever-rising cost of game development?" I was shocked by this. And to Riley's question, because we have spoken a lot, Chris, about what games make sense in this format. And I think that sports games are the obvious ones. And then next up to that would be like racing games like Gran Turismo. This is like way back on the list. So Riley is right. The games that I would call out are not the ones that I would have never guessed Assassin's Creed would do this, especially after what they admit, which is that the last two Assassin's Creed games are the best-selling Assassin's Creed games. So Ubisoft is really trying to do something interesting here. I'm wondering what you think about that.
I don't think Assassin's Creed is strong enough in the gameplay department to hold a live service together for a long time. The reason GTA Online works is because there's a lot of facets to it. There's vehicles, there's like custom levels, there are, there's an entire physics engine that is like pretty robust and pretty weird and really just bizarre. And Assassin's Creed, in comparison, is a pretty standard fare. I mean, there's like combat and all that stuff, but I don't know if users can make combat any more interesting than combat already is. There's not really that space for something insane and wacky like there is in something like GTA Online. And if there is a space for that in Assassin's Creed, it would have to be something that completely breaks the tone of what that experience is. It's I don't know who thought Assassin's Creed, especially the most recent iterations, were too short. It seems to be the opposite.
Right. That's what I was thinking too. Wasn't that everyone complaining that the new one is like ridiculous?
Yeah, it's like everybody. The main complaint that everybody has about these two best-selling games is that they're too long. So the idea that they would want to make one infinite is really bizarre. And I don't know. This is just not what I would have anticipated. And while I have Ubisoft's attention here, Ubisoft, please, for the love of God, don't make a Splinter Cell. Take everything I said back. I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want like some Splinter Cell live service or fucking some weird shit. Just let it die. I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
all right?
You're good now.
Just let Sam Fisher rest, though, for fuck's sake. Don't show him anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is kind of, I don't know. I mean, it seemed like they were kind of go in this direction with the Division and other games. Like they have that big Division game. They like moved it over to Red Storm, which is very weird. Yeah. And it's fine. I like the Division. Red Storm hasn't made a game of their own in a long ass time, so it's going to be an interesting thing for that. But Dustin, Ubisoft, I want to give them credit. I mean, this is them looking at one of their really important IP and saying, we have to do something now, because if we keep making these games and the 3 and 4 year lead times that they take, we don't make these decisions now and we might be sorry later. So I do give them credit for taking what is essentially their prize jewel outside of the Tom Clancy stuff and saying like, we're going to actually really fuck around with this. And you can't help but respect that, or at least I can't.
Right. It's strange just because I feel like what Assassin's Creed fans want out of Assassin's Creed, or at least what I hear that people like about the game, is how the map covered with activities, the map clearing and doing all of this stuff in this huge world. And so to hear it's like, hey, we're going to be able to release more smaller things, that appeals more to me, which is like, if I could play an Assassin's Creed story that's 8 to 12 hours and they come out with 2 or 3 of them a year, that's much more appealing to me. And I mean, that's also, there's rumors right now about Grand Theft Auto doing the same type of thing. That actually, I mean, I feel like it makes more sense for a game like that, where it's like, okay, you make a city, you make the playground, and now we can then create smaller campaigns that all fit in the same map. But that's not what they said they're doing with this Assassin's Creed. They said more worlds. So I'm like, are you creating more smaller worlds? Which again is appealing to a lot of us, but I don't think would be appealing to a lot of people that play Assassin's Creed, that love like doing, I mean, I don't mean this in a mean way, but doing the same thing over and over again with like, there's 10 activities and you do that a million times across the map. That's fine. You can already see some of the DNA though of a live service game. Like the armor and equipment feels like Destiny in Assassin's Creed games now. Like they have like, you know, there's cubes around your character that shows the different stats and stuff like that. Yeah. But Chris, you looked like you had a thought right when Colin was throwing it over to me.
Oh, well, no, it was just because I wanted to address the question here at the end of Riley's inquiry here, where it says, do you think this is the future of AAA single player games with the ever rising cost of game development? I don't think so. I think in the third party space, I think that's really possible, where like, you know, a lot of big publishers will probably lean on the you know, on the crutch of like, oh, live service, it makes a lot of money, microtransactions makes a lot of money, why spend millions of dollars making a game where you can spend a couple million making a game that makes money in perpetuity? I think that's probably going to be the case for third party, but I do think we're still going to have those first party gems to draw people to the machines in the first place. I don't think you're going to see a situation where Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo don't make single player games just because game development is really expensive. I think those single player experiences are the things that draw people to the machines in the first place. And so I think that will always have like a strong foundation, but I wouldn't be surprised to see like a future where like most of your single player experiences are independent. And if they're not independent, they come from major, like, you know, big buttressed first party studios that have a vested interest in making something that is expensive and high quality to draw people to the platform that they want people to spend money on. But that's big future shit. That's like 10 years from now. I could see, you know.
To pose a different question here, because I think that a lot of hesitance, like people, there's a gut instant negative reaction about hearing live service, like turning a single player game into a live service game. But I don't know how they're going to do it. But let's just play hypothetical. Like, does live service have to mean multiplayer? Like I put out this idea a second ago. I'm really thinking about it now. Imagine the next GTA. They build, let's say it's Vice City, and you buy the game and there's maybe the first one's pretty big. Let's say it's 30 hours. And then there's GTA Online. And then in 6 to 8 months, they release a new campaign that's 12 hours. But it's transformative in that it's like, instead it's Vice City in 1985. And so they're able to use the core of what they have and change it in order to make more experiences like that. And then maybe, you know, there's the next campaign is you play as a character's brother that you loosely hear about. And so you kind of can have this anthology of stories that all center around this one location. That's really kind of appealing to me, actually, when I'm thinking about like
it's kind of like what they did on PSP with the Liberty Cities stories and Vice City stories, where it's similar to that.
So what do you think, Colin, about like, would you find a live service game that's single player and ever adapting appealing to you despite the fact that you're, I guess it would still be single player.
Yeah,
then,
I mean,
right?
it would be appealing to me because I've gone and played games as a service or persistent games, not many, but that I've forced into being single player games, right? Like
like Division.
I played the Division 2. I played the Division 2 for probably 100 hours. I played and platinumed Outriders, which is a multiplayer game, and made it into a single player game. So something like that, you're absolutely right, Dustin, actually. There's nothing that says that a live service game, actually, you know what is a live service game that is kind of like this is Hitman. And I think that that's like the only, like, where it's like, yeah, this is kind of supported in this way. IO Interactive, it's episodic, but they kind of give, like, there's events and targets, and so that's kind of like that, and that's kind of cool. But my whole thing is like, because you were talking about these little offerings, and we've often talked about our love of Grand Theft Auto 4's DLC, The Ballad of Gay Tony, and The Lost and the Damned. And it's unbelievable that we never got any more of that. It's really unbelievable. I would argue that those two stories are better than the stories of the cousins in GTA 4. And I'm frustrated that Rockstar and Take-Two aren't like, okay, we can do both. Like, I know that Grand Theft Auto Online is just this moneymaker, but why are you alienating people that really do love Grand Theft Auto for what it used to be? You're one of the few entities that truly can have it both ways, and you're going to make money on it. It might not be like the zillions of dollars that you're used to, but look at Red Dead Redemption 2. And I think this is maybe one of the reasons, and we're going to talk about Dan Houser later, but this might be one of the reasons why Dan Houser left, is because he's the writer. And when there's nothing to write, like what's left for them to write? Red Dead is out, and then he left. So I just feel like that's my major frustration, is why are you guys cornering yourselves when you're one of the few entities with the respect, the capital, the energy, the creativity to do all of this? And so again, because Chris brought it up earlier, like to Riley's point, I don't think it's the future of single player development, but I am interested in both the Grand Theft Auto rumors percolating and what that means. And then I also, again, want to give props to Ubisoft, kind of this middling AAA publisher when it comes to how people feel about them, doing something that I think is interesting. And the rumors, by the way, on the lower end is that Konami is going to make Pro Evolution Soccer free to play. And that's going to be another really interesting thing. And that's the kind of shit that needs to happen. That's a huge thing that is going to hurt FIFA, right? So I guess everyone at different levels are kind of figuring these things out. Meanwhile, as Dustin, you said, I think on our last episode, again, persistent rumors that Call of Duty is in trouble this year. This is what happens when you try to just hammer the nail over and over again. It's just eventually the nail gets bent up. I actually don't know how Activision has gotten away with this. Like, to their credit, they haven't really fucked up. Like, there's been no catastrophic Call of Duty game release. Like, none that is like a meltdown. No one goes like in 2014, they released that bullshit. It's like people like some of them and don't like some of them, but they all sell like 20 million copies.
Yeah, you're right. They're within the community, there's definitely consternation. I think it's unanimously agreed that Ghosts is the worst one.
Yeah.
From what I've experienced, that was, I think, the PS4 debut one, right? That was like the one that launched with PS4.
That's right.
That's the one that everybody's like, this is fucking terrible, but it still sold a lot, and everybody fucking played it.
It sold Call of Duty. Call of Duty Ghosts. I just want to make sure I got the day right. Yeah, Call of Duty Ghosts was a launch game on PS4. 3 months later, it had sold 19 million copies.
Yeah,
dude,
that's nuts. By the way, that's nuts.
It was Infinite Warfare that had the most disliked trailer on YouTube, or like the disliked video, and it sold. I mean, they made a shit ton.
Yeah. Because it was that trailer came out, I think, either before, like immediately before or immediately after the Battlefield 1 trailer, and the Battlefield 1 trailer was fucking awesome.
Right.
So they had like no shot of getting a good reaction out of that. But yeah, they still make a shit ton of money. So fucking whatever, man.
It's
at a certain point.
It's funny too, in the sense that Battlefield 1, I remember that Battlefield 1 got outsold by Call of Duty that year, probably 5-1, and EA fucking kneecapped its own game with Titanfall. So
yeah,
that was such a 2016. I'll never forget that. I was like, what is going on here? This is so This is so strange. I'm sure people lost their jobs because of that. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Number 3, speaking of Electronic Arts own developer Dice LA now has a new name, and better yet, it's working on an all-new project. According to a post on EA's official website, Dice LA will now be known as Ripple Effect Studios. Before this, Dice LA never had much of an identity of its own, though it was founded as a DreamWorks associated team in the 90s, renamed to EA LA in 2000, and then again to Danger Close in 2010. Remember them, of course, they made the Medal of Honor reboot. In 2013, it was rebranded once more as Dice LA, and it worked on quite a few games in a support capacity, including on 2015's Battlefield Hardline and Star Wars Battlefront, 2016's Battlefield 1, 2017's Battlefield 5, and 2019's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. These days, however, the team is led by Vince Zampella, co-founder of Activision-owned Call of Duty studio Infinity Ward and EA-owned Titanfall and Apex Legends team Respawn, and he's still there too. As head of Ripple Effects, Zampella and studio GM Christian Grass will be looking forward with a, quote, ambition to become a studio that excels at everything, ellipsis. We're so proud of our work as Dice LA, and the Dice team will forever be part of our DNA, but over the past 8 years, we've developed our own way of doing things. We're excited to look towards the future, expand the team, and establish our own identity, end quote. The team is thus looking to expand beyond just its work on the upcoming Battlefield 2042. Its new project, unknown even in industry circles, has yet to be announced. Not much to say here, Dustin, but I'm wondering, do you think this is a relevant move? It seems like EA is activating one of its support studios. This is not unlike what Activision did to Raven a couple of years ago, where, remember, Raven was making its own games, then Raven wasn't making its own games. Now Raven is making its own games. You'll recall that Dice LA used to be called Danger Close and was making its own games, and now wasn't, and now is again. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing to think about is I actually just watched a video last night calling from our boy Company Man, a great YouTuber, about Activision. And he was like, "Why? I think the series is like why they're hated." And he did one on EA a month or two ago, and now he's done one on Activision. And I was thinking about, EA, they were notoriously the most hated company, and maybe rightfully so, maybe a little unjustified in certain areas. But you got to look at them now and think that they've really done things pretty differently. They've done some experimental projects. Of course, most recently, It Takes Two was a huge success. They're making, they're letting this team that's a support studio kind of like blossom into their own thing. And meanwhile, Activision has moved all of their teams to work on one product, Call of Duty. They teased us with excellent remakes and a new Crash game, only to get rid of those studios. And so, EA, you're not so bad anymore. I would say you're not perfect, but it seems like Activision has taken your crown. Is it a crown to be the most hated?
Could be.
I don't know what
crown
it is,
of thorns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting because, and Chris, I'm curious what you think of this, especially because Zampella is going over there, and I had kind of misunderstood this, and I was reading more about it. Vince Zampella, I mean, has been kind of empowered in an almost multi-studio function that is not really seen in a lot of other places, and you see it a little bit with Scott Rhodey in the United States with Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch and all of them. But I wonder what you think about him kind of going between both studios. And I find that interesting only because on one hand, they're saying like we've created our own way of doing things, and yet you're not empowering your own people to lead the studio. You're bringing in Vince Zampella to do it. So it seems like a little bit of a contradiction.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like he might be a little bit stretched thin. I feel like that's usually the thing that happens whenever somebody's kind of put in this weird kind of centralized position within multiple studios. It's just not easy for it's not easy for like anybody to manage that amount of shit going on. So like that's definitely like a challenge that he has. But overall, I think this is cool. This news. I think the name of the studio really sucks, but
yeah, I saw or heard your reaction to that. Yeah, it is a pretty bad name. When you have the chance to name something, you have to take it more seriously.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. There's something that comes across about it that's like both generic and pretentious. Like Ripple. If it's like our works will ripple throughout the solar system, and like I don't know, like. I'm sure what you do will be fine. Like I'm sure it'll be really good, but like maybe just calm down a little bit.
Yeah, well, the leader of the studio, Christian Grass, it's Christian Grass, has been there He worked on Medal of Honor and everything else, so they have some experience there. I agree. I often lament this to Micah when we're driving around our area, and you see, I don't know, like Smith Street or whatever, and it's like, you had an opportunity, like a developer had an opportunity in this development to name the streets. Why is it named Daisy Road? Are you fucking kidding me? You know, if I was naming, like, if I spent millions of dollars and bought like a development and I was building houses on it and there was like all these streets and I was up to me to name them, and they would be named like insane things. I would just name all of the streets insane things. I don't know even what I would have to think about it, but it wouldn't be ripple effect. Let's see.
Yeah.
Number 4. RoboCop is slated to receive an all-new video game, the first console RoboCop game since 2003, when Titus Interactive released a poorly received FPS on PlayStation 2 and elsewhere. This time, though, it seems like the license may be in better hands. The game, which will be called RoboCop Rogue City, will be developed by Teon and distributed by publisher Nacon in collaboration with the owner of the RoboCop IP, MGM. Teon is a Polish studio perhaps best known for its 2019 FPS Terminator Resistance, based on another 80s sci-fi classic. That game was well received, though its 2014 rail shooter based on the Rambo franchise, which came to PS3 that year, bombed critically. In fact, I think it got a 1 on a few sites. The team is otherwise largely known.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's awful. I've never given a game a 1. I only gave one game a 2. The team is otherwise largely known for casual, more shovelware type games. As for this RoboCop game, it's unclear exactly what it will be, story or gameplay wise, though we know it'll come to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 in 2023. RoboCop, which first came to theaters in 1987 and which was followed by 2 more films in 1990 and 1993, focuses on Detroit area cop Alex Murphy, who was killed and revived as a cyborg police officer. The first 3 films all had games attached to them, the first 2 on NES and the third on SNES and Genesis. The 1994 Genesis and SNES game RoboCop versus the Terminator put the 2 80s heroes together. Other than the aforementioned 2003 game, that's it for RoboCop games. Nacon, the game's publisher, is a 40-plus-year-old British entity best known for its sports releases, including in the WRC hunting simulator, Tour de France, rugby, tennis pool, and other series. So, Chris, I saw you laughing at this. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I can't think of a team better equipped to handle a RoboCop game than the team that brought us tennis and Tour de France.
And you know, and they brought us Resistance. I'm sorry, not Resistance. Terminator Resistance. So, which was a pretty well received game. They just brought it to PS5. It wasn't like,
yeah. RoboCop to me is just one of those things. Like when you describe it, it sounds very much of its time. You know,
dude, it's a Reagan era, definitely like a deep 80s thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where like it kind of reminds me of Ghostbusters, where like you can't do that again. I don't think. Like you could. I don't know if you could really do this again, because it's kind of a miracle that this thing even worked the first time. That's why Ghostbusters 2 was like that even had the original cast, and that was like just a fucking mess that everybody was like, what?
Yeah, and they refused, or at least they had elements of that production that never wanted to do the third one because of that. As far as I know.
Of course. Like that's like it's lightning in a bottle with the first Ghostbusters. Like perfect time, perfect place, perfect like encapsulation of the era. And like RoboCop to me is like another one of these where it's like I don't know why we're getting a RoboCop game now in 2021. I don't know how cool RoboCop really is in comparison to really anything else that we have that's even slightly similar. I don't know. I guess they see something here, so cool. And I'm sure this is like super nostalgic for a lot of people, but I would be baffled if this turns out to be good.
Yeah,
I'll be genuinely shocked. I mean, I hope it is. That'd be great.
I was looking at, because I thought I remembered this, that Joel Kinnaman and Gary Oldman and Michael Keaton, Samuel L. Jackson, they were all in a RoboCop reboot. Remember in 2014, and I was looking at the box office draw, and it made $240 million. So there was like some weird interest in it. I agree. RoboCop is an incredibly war on drugs, violent era. RoboCop is an almost conservative film. It actually reminds me in a lot of ways of Red Dawn, where it's like Red Dawn is like rah 80s conservative shit. It's awesome because of that, because it is an encapsulation of that space and time. But it's also interesting, Chris, that you brought up Ghostbusters specifically and others, where I've thought about that too. And I've said this much to people's frustration, but I look at some of these 80s franchises, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future is another one, and a few others where I'm like, why are you so obsessed with this shit? Like, it's good. Like, but it's good. Why are we still talking about Ghostbusters? You know, like so long. So I don't know if people think I'm crazy about that. I feel that way much more about Back to the Future, where I'm like, enough already of the fucking Back to the Future.
I love Back to the Future.
Oh,
I love Back to the Future.
So yeah, well, I like the first one too.
But I like all of them. But I don't want any more of them. Is the thing,
right?
And I don't need any more of them. It's fine. Like, remember, didn't they like release like a Telltale Back to the Future game?
Yeah, that was before. That was before Telltale was even big. That was like the game they did before they were big.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. I was like, stop.
Yeah, I played
like,
that.
You can't.
Too.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
But it doesn't work now. Like it was for the time, and it's great that it's immortal now because it's like it's a really good trilogy of movies, but you can't recapture this again. And that's, I don't know, maybe. And it should be noted that the RoboCop movie that we're talking about, that like was it the 2014 thing, that was around the time when they were doing Total Recall as well,
right?
When they were like doing all these like weird 80s, like kind of like, let's get the 80s back. And that was actually when the Ghostbusters thing started production also as well, because that was 2016 that movie came out. So like there was this weird point in the middle 2010s where everybody was like, what is 80s? Let's bring it back up again and see what sticks. And I mean, fair enough, RoboCop did well, and I guess that probably has something to do with this decision, but we'll see.
Yeah, what do you think, Dustin? I'm interested in Taeyeon's attraction to 80s movies. Clearly they are all in on this stuff. Like they did Rambo, Terminator, and now they're doing this. I wonder what that's all about.
Well, it goes beyond them. That's what I was just thinking about, is that there has been over the past decade like this resurgence in making 80s movies into games again. Like if you think about Friday the 13th, and then of course the many iterations of Alien, Predator.
Yeah, Ilphonic.
Ilphonic did that. And they're making an Evil Dead game right now that you may remember. So just interesting, because unfortunately most, if not all of them, I mean, they're always mixed at best. And it's like, it should be, you present these IPs on a silver platter. Like, it's just like, go nuts. Half of your work is already done in making this awesome. And then it's just like, I don't want to say no effort, because it's not, there's effort. It's just sad because a lot of these games come out and they are just cheap and not, I don't know if they're just like, it's a nostalgia play on the Gen Xers who will just buy it because it's Ghostbusters. They re-released that Ghostbusters game on PS4. So I just don't know.
Yeah, that Ghostbusters game was supposed to be the third movie, right? Like that was kind of the endorsed continuation, and got everyone back involved before people started dying. So it is interesting though, Dustin, because I'm of the mind, I brought up Red Dawn earlier, which is an IP I absolutely adore. It's actually an MGM movie, so that's kind of maybe gives me a little hope that they would do something. And my mind was, why not put a little money and effort into this shit? We talked about how Control was made for $25 million. That's it. Games don't have to be bad on a budget. They don't. And you don't have to sell very many. They sold 2 million copies and made more than twice their money back. So you look at something like this and it's like, okay, Taeyeon is fine. I heard it's Terminator was a massive step forward for them. So maybe this game doesn't come out until 2023. It looks like they're going to take time. But I can't help but think, I'm like, man, give us a Red Dawn game. Like, that would be so cool, and spend some money on it. You play as all the teenagers and you're being invaded by the Soviets, and that would be dope. But then we have a game like Generation Zero, which is kind of that, and it fucking sucks because it was made for like $2. You got to put in some effort.
I just think this feels like one of those things where like I would open up a magazine in 2004 and like I would see like a RoboCop game and I would think, oh, cool. It's kind of like how I felt like when I realized there was a Godfather video game, like when I was that age, in like 2005 or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. But like, it feels like 15 years like after that point where it would have been cool to me.
Totally.
So just
totally.
I don't know.
Scarface had a game that generation too, which was so weird. They were really trying.
So bizarre.
It was because Grand Theft Auto brought out all of the criminality shit to the forefront, where it's like, this is what we want.
Yeah.
That's where like Manhunt and all that kind of stuff came from too. But I don't know. I am most curious to see, I think, moving forward, how some of these other IP are treated. And I've said on the show, and certainly I've said it privately to Barry, I'm so keen on doing a G.I. Joe game, like a side-scrolling 16-bit probably style, that I would literally pay to make that. I would literally invest my own money into it. That's how much I believe that it would be fucking dope. All I would need is Hasbro to be like, you can do whatever you want. And I'll be like, fine, I'll take care of the rest. And I just know that there are people that are passionate out there about all of this stuff that would do that. And it makes you wonder how they find these partners. And they released that shite G.I. Joe game last year, which I platinumed. It's one of my rarest platinum trophies, but it was horrible. It's like, it's not a good game. It's like, why give me that money and I'll make you something awesome.
I'm gonna make you John Woo's Stranglehold 2.
Oh man, that's another one of that era. Enter the Matrix era. All right.
Yeah.
Number 5. We spoke about this a little bit earlier, but as predicted on this very show, Dan Houser is returning to video games. As the co-founder of Rockstar, one of the most storied developers in video game history, Houser is one of the most important figures to ever emerge from the industry, alongside his brother Sam. Houser is best known as the writer behind the Grand Theft Auto games, though his work is extensive. He wrote every single Grand Theft Auto game from the series beginnings in 1999 right up through 2003's Grand Theft Auto 5. He also wrote 2006's Bully, 2010's Red Dead Redemption and its 2018 sequel, and 2012's Max Payne 3, and acted as producer of GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas, and the executive producer of Red Dead, Red Dead 2, GTA 5, Max Payne 3, and even LA Noire, which Rockstar published. However, in early 2020, following a sabbatical after the release of Red Dead Redemption 2 in 2018, Houser left Rockstar and has been quiet since, but according to multiple sources, he's on the verge of returning. Multiple sources report that Houser is attached to a company called Absurd Ventures in Games. As noted by website gamesindustry.biz, Absurd Ventures in Games is listed as a company in, quote, ready-made interactive leisure and entertainment software development, end quote, and it's out of Delaware, which most businesses are. That's all we know for now, but it appears necessary legal filings outed his plans before he was ready. It's unclear what his company will be particularly focused on, if it will be in the PlayStation or even console space at all, and when all will be revealed, but it's clear Dan Houser is about to make his return. I saw this. I thought I was really excited about this. This is awesome news. Chris, what do you make about this? I feel like Dan Houser clearly left Rockstar. I mean, we don't know for sure. I'm not going to say clearly. Here's my theory, though. Rockstar is not the Rockstar he founded. And they brought in Take-Two a long time ago, and the money's there, and they're hundreds of millions of dollars the Houser brothers have made. They're totally great. But I don't feel like there's a purpose for him there anymore. I think that after he took a sabbatical and came back and we're like, we still have nothing for you to do. I mean, like, what is he going to do? So do you think that theory is correct? And if so, do you think he's going to come back and give us like maybe the GTA game we want, which is kind of what I'm excited about?
The thing that, well, first of all, I think you're right. But I also think the thing that worries me about this is Rockstar was such a unique company in the sense that it allowed this man to write something as phenomenal as Red Dead Redemption 2 and also have the team and the time and the money and the technical chops within that team to really bring a story like that forward in a way that was captivating and high quality and high polish and just very, very good. I wonder how strongly his writing would shine at a company with a fraction of that budget and a fraction of that team and a fraction of that talent. I am inclined to believe that it would, only because, you know, he worked on some of the older games and those were great with like not nearly the same amount of capital behind them too. But I just it's always a shame when a writer of something really good leaves and starts. That's kind of how, honestly, it's kind of how I'm feeling about Ken Levine as well, where I'm like, I'm really wondering like what the hell this thing is going to be, especially after so long with very little said, where like, I have no doubt that he can write something amazing, but can the team behind him really get that across or really serve his writing well enough? That's a whole nother question. And it's one that it's the only reason why I'm not super excited about this. I would have hoped that he would have returned to Rockstar or gone to like a crazy big studio, you know?
Sure. But the big question, I mean, because you make a lot of good points, and the big question is who is funding this team? He could be funding it himself. And if they need a publisher and if they're working with a publisher, there's a lot of, I mean, maybe they end up back with 2K. Who the hell knows? What are you thinking about this, Dustin, about the return possibly of Dan Houser?
it's exciting. I mean, he's legendary, but it's interesting because he's not quite the household name that like Kojima is or something, but clearly he's on that level. And I'm curious about what his, I mean, it says he's executive produced, so it goes beyond just his, the writing, but I'm glad to see that he's coming back to games because I could see a scenario where he writes a novel and it's like from Dan Houser, the creator of Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead, or writer of Red Dead Redemption. And I bet you it would be pretty fucking awesome just because when I think about Red Dead Redemption 2, man, the more that time goes, I think about Red Dead Redemption 2 and I think it's like narratively just one of the greatest games ever created.
Oh, no doubt.
Just like someone, I don't know who said this, but someone once compared it as like it's the War and Peace of video games just because it's so long, but it's so good. Same time, you think about those moments and the adventures that Arthur Morgan has. And I mean, Arthur Morgan as a character. And so he could do any medium. I bet you that he could direct and write a movie, right? Like he maybe could be like Tarantino or something. Second time I brought up him on the show, but like he could really do whatever he wants, but it's clear that he's passionate about games. And, I'm kind of on the fence here. I'm in agreement with Chris that it is questionable what it'll be like when he's detached from Rockstar. But we also, on the flip side of that, he could make his best game ever without some of the red tape that maybe got set up around him with such a big company like Rockstar. So really, just a lot of limitless potential here.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried too, but I do feel like I'm a little more bullish on this just because it's exciting to think you walk into, let's assume he's not using his own money and he walks into Activision and he walks into EA or whatever. And he's like, listen, I wrote Grand Theft Auto 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Vice City, San Andreas, Chinatown Wars, Liberty City Stories, Vice City Stories. I wrote Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. He doesn't have to do anything else. It's very similar to what Chris was saying with Ken Levine, where I'm like, I'm good with Ken Levine, like as far as his place in the industry. He's done enough. I mean, I want him to do much more, but that's how impressive it is. So my hope and my dream when I saw this was like, because Chris is saying, what does it look like making a game without Rockstar's help? And I come from the other angle where I'm like, what does it look like to make a game where they're not constantly telling you that it's going to thrive online and that it doesn't really need your component to it, and that they didn't seem particularly happy with him during Red Dead's development either, right? He brought him a lot of heat in a lot of these interviews. So with like saying this, they worked 120 hours and the story printed out is stacked from floor to ceiling and shit. Like, I understood why he needed to get away. I think you can kind of read between the lines. So we'll see.
Yeah, that is fair. He is an amazing writer, and like Dustin said, I really do think that Red Dead Redemption 2 is potentially some of the best. I think the best character work in this medium. So like, I'm excited to see what the hell it is. I just hope that the team behind him can really make that writing shine in the way that Rockstar did.
He's saying right now, listening to this, I got a plan. All right.
I got a plan.
Boy. Number 6. I say that to Rush all the time. Number 6. Yeah. When it comes to the shutdown of various old PlayStation hardware's online and store functionality, it seems the sky is truly not falling. After reversing its decision to shut down both the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita stores later this summer, Sony opted to press ahead with the final closure of its store for PlayStation Portable. But when the early July date came and went, it became clear that Sony's interpretation of closing PSP Store was quite literal. That's because you can still buy digital PSP games right now via both PS3 and Vita, and it doesn't seem to be an accident. Indeed, according to Sony's own website, quote, you'll still be able to purchase and play PSP content that is available on the PS3 and PS Vita stores, end quote. However, the removal of in-game content purchases and purchases from the PSP native store itself remains. PlayStation Portable, Sony's first portable handheld, launched in Japan in 2004 and in the West in 2005. It was discontinued in 2014, 2 years after the release of its beleaguered successor, Vita. At around 80 million units sold, it's one of the best-selling pieces of gaming hardware ever, though eclipsed by almost everything Nintendo has launched in that space. So not much to say here, although I'll just say this, Chris, that this all ended up being much ado about nothing. Like this should be looked at as a massive error in communications with Sony and comes from the very top. They made it seem like they were going to take PlayStation 3 down. They were making a big deal out of the PSP and the Vita. Nothing has happened, with the exception of now you just can't buy in-game purchases on PSP or buy games through the PSP storefront. So it's a little frustrating, isn't it, that they brought a lot of heat on themselves for no reason.
Yeah, no real reason ultimately. Although, like, they did say that they reversed decisions. So, like, maybe if there wasn't any, you say much ado about nothing, maybe the much ado allowed this to be nothing. Sure. That's also a possibility that they was like, we'll walk back on this. But yeah, this is a major. I don't know why they even bothered to do that in the first place. They really set a fire under their asses for no good reason, and only got themselves more bad press for no good reason. It's a shame, but I guess this isn't the worst outcome for this. Man, I every time the PSP is mentioned, I have so many fond memories of that thing. I love the PSP so much. Like that, the ethos around it specifically, like the advertising and like the time.
Definitely.
Like there's the UI was just like the PS3 thing. I always found the PSP as a piece of hardware a lot better than the Vita, although the Vita is obviously stronger and has like better titles on it. Something about that machine is just really, really lovely.
I agree. And Dustin, what do you think about this? Still, PSP lives.
Yeah, no, I think it's you're talking about the unnecessary heat. It just is a clear example of Sony's both their disorganization and their I don't know, tone deaf. They just sometimes don't understand like read the room with, especially with them shutting down services right when Xbox was like announcing like all this backwards compatibility and stuff like that. It's like, guys, just listen for a little bit. Listen to what's happening and maybe talk to some people in the company before you make decisions. Seems obvious, but it's not. Apparently.
As I understand it from reporting that I've read on the subject, the cost to leave the PS3 and Vita stores is in the 6 digits. That's all it costs, Sony. 6 digits. Like, so even to Chris's point, if they were like, well, we didn't know, it's like you were doing this to save. You're a fucking Sony. You were going to save less than $1 million a year shutting these stores down. Come on, man. Give me a break. Like at some point, someone's got to be in that boardroom being like, are we joking with this? Like, why would we even just get this off the list? Who cares? Just hire four engineers. That's their job. And we don't hear from them ever again. That's it. Done.
Yeah.
All right. Now, this next one, I want to give everyone a kind of shout out. This is a political topic. So you have the right to opt out of it if you'd like. I would just fast forward, I don't know, a little bit if you want.
There'll be timestamps.
Okay, timestamps. Thank you for that. Number 7, Arc System Works' Guilty Gear Strive is one of the most popular titles in the fighting game space right now. Indeed, the game released in early June on both PS4 and PS5 has earned high marks pretty much across the board. But an edit was made to the game recently that's worth noting. Version 1.03 of Guilty Gear Strive removes the word Taiwan, the word Tibet, and the word Uyghur from its in-game lore entries related to China. As reported by website Eurogamer, quote, Strive includes an in-game glossary, which itself includes a large number of lore entries to help players understand its convoluted backstory, end quote. But mentions of these taboo words in China were silently removed, and as Eurogamer notes, quote, under Chinese law, video games can't contain anything that, quote, threatens China's national unity, sovereignty, or territorial integrity, harm the nation's reputation, security interest, or include anything that harms public ethics or China's culture and traditions, end quote. The references here are obvious. Taiwan and Tibet both have serious territorial disputes with China, and the Uyghurs are, of course, kept in concentration camps by China's Communist Party, where they are forcibly re-educated. What's odd is that, unlike some other entities, Arc System Works isn't owned, either partially or wholly, by any Chinese interests. This is relevant because Chinese corporations are widely understood to be intimately intertwined with their government, and for Arc System Works to have access to the Chinese market for any of its games, it must play ball. Such news sullied otherwise positive word out of Arc that Guilty Gear Strive may be getting cross-platform play between PlayStation and PC, essential for the continued success of any modern fighting game. Guilty Gear, which began on the original PlayStation in 1998, is one of Arc System Works' 2 beloved fighting series, the other being BlazBlue. Guilty Gear Strive.
So, dude, this is such a weird one because it's like, first of all, they could have just avoided this by never putting it in the game to begin with, and then there wouldn't be any hubbub about it. But apparently they didn't think ahead. But again, it's like, it's such a difficult minefield. We've talked about this in the fact that it's like we can't live a purely moralistic life and get rid of all Chinese stuff. But at the same time, there's like examples of this where it's like, dude, like, why? Don't. We're talking about, I think that some people aren't grasping the whole concentration camp thing, just because with the political climate in the United States being so hyperbolic in our language that we use about it, saying like people saying we live under fascism, or at least they were saying that during Trump, and talking about things like that. What I'm wondering to some people, like, this term, it's like, no, this is literally concentration camps. We have videos of them with like tied up. There's been reports of like wigs coming out of China that have human hair. Like, fucked up shit is happening. Like, it's, unacceptable. And so for me, it's like, yeah, we can't live full moralistic lives where we completely remove China from our lives. But at the same time, it's like, you can't kowtow to and appease the Chinese government. Like, to me, it's like, I guess they can. They're thinking about money, and they're weighing the pros and cons of thinking like, well, we're going to lose a lot of money, and it's, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but I know it kind of is to me. I feel a little scatterbrained about this. Am I making some sense?
No, you are. I just feel like, I don't think people understand to the point enough about what's going on. I think that it's obfuscated by China's economic power in the United States. And it's why I keep saying, in the West generally, and it's why I keep saying that we can't live moralistic economic lives in this world. We it's just not really possible. You're buying Chinese components in your PlayStation. Chinese individuals can invest in these companies outside of Tencent and the others that are big mega corporations intertwined with the CCP. But people have to understand that China's Uyghur population. So for people that don't know, there's a part of China, I think it's called Xinjiang, that's tucked against Mongolia. And these are people that there might be more than 1 million people in concentration camps and in work camps right now. And they're re-educated. The stuff they do, their worship is banned, all of this kind of stuff. And not to mention Tibet and Taiwan. Taiwan is an independent country, ostensibly. And so is Tibet. I mean, these are disputed areas, and China, if it was up to China, Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and all these other places would be sovereign to, within the sovereign realm of China. But I find this completely disgusting and distasteful, because it's one of those things where you can make an active choice. And I brought this up on Twitter, although I'm sure a lot of people didn't see it because it was in response to someone. Someone had said to me when I complained about this that, well, businesses make business decisions. And I'm like, well, we could have sold really high quality items in our store that I recently got a hold of, that actually a fan of the show sent us, really high quality goods. And we backed out because they're made in China. And by the way, they're made in audited Chinese factories, meaning that these are actually good, so-called good Chinese factories that have like human rights and proper money and safety. And I still didn't want anything to do with that. So don't fucking tell me that companies can't make the choice to either engage or not engage. And as far as our games are concerned at Lilymo, I am literally moving forward going to start putting things like Tibet is a country, Hong Kong is a country, just in the trophy and achievements list, just to make sure that they never publish our stuff there. Because I don't want their money. And so, Chris, what do you think about this situation?
I don't know. I think as the show's resident lefty boy, I think this is kind of the problem where when you have a system that is very, very money focused and very, very bottom line oriented and very, very capitalistic in nature, you eventually get to a situation where money supersedes any ethical or moral duty to uphold any kind of real standard. And that's kind of why it's not super healthy to think of, the market as some kind of thing that always needs to be appeased. Sometimes the market needs to be ignored, and sometimes you're going to miss out on millions of dollars, but the trade-off for that is you get to say whatever you want, and the trade-off for that is you get to, still make you. It's not like I don't like the way that it's framed, where it's like you lose a lot of money. You don't lose a lot of money. You just don't make more. Those are very different things to me, or the way that I think about things, because it's like the fact that just so I'm clear, by the way, this game, Guilty Gear Strive, it had mentions of Tibet, Taiwan, and Uyghurs removed from every version.
Yeah, just in a patch.
That's fucked.
And I don't think that I don't think it overtly happened either. I think actually certain websites have like taken the lore entries and put them together and been like, these things have been removed.
Yeah. I don't imagine that they would have put it in the patch notes.
Yeah, removed all references to offensive Chinese things.
Yeah, I don't know. There is a danger in kowtowing to the people with the most money, and that happens when, the people with the most money also happen to be diametrically opposed to the very standards that you value as a human being who just finds value in just basic human rights and basic freedom of speech and basic the things that we take for granted. And I don't know, it's a complicated situation, but for me it's not really that complicated. Like if people don't want to, if I'm making something and it offends the Chinese government and I can't make money in China, then I'll find a way to make money here. There's no shortage of people buying here. There's no shortage of money to be made here. People are constantly buying shit. Like, you can still make a stupid amount of money without China. So the only reason why you would want to appease China, in my opinion, is purely greed. Like, there's no other reason, because you can make more money than you could have ever dreamed of without China in the picture at all. So I don't know. I can't feel too bad about like any criticism that Arc Systems is getting, because I hate this shit. Like, it bothered me when Call of Duty like took that weird Tiananmen Square clip out of the Call of Duty trailer that they re-uploaded with the same URL, almost as if like nothing happened.
Right.
It's creepy shit. And it's even creepier that it's happening in studios that aren't even tied financially or logistically or business wise to the country that is censoring them. That's even more gross and even more disturbing, because you made that decision on your own. You weren't even like forced in any real way. So I don't know. It bothers me.
Yeah, it bothers me. It's just something that I think needs to be discussed more. I see almost no one in the industry talking about this. And meanwhile, we were talking, and I'm just going to say it, like, much of the industry was basically one step away from calling Israelis genocidal maniacs about a month ago. Just want to throw that out there. Okay. Now, something like this happens and consistently happens. And by the way, communist China is evil. We just deal with them because we have to. We let them into the World Trade Organization. We normalize relations with them. We made our own bed. So it's like, what are you going to do? I mean, you can make individual choices to just not participate. And that's my whole thing, Chris, is like, I don't mind if they have an issue with it. I don't mind if they don't want to sell it. But it goes back to that whole thing that happened with the NBA when the Houston Rockets GM said something about Hong Kong, and it was like a massive problem. And they had to like all apologize, or what we were saying with the wrestler that's in Fast and Furious.
Oh, John Cena
apologizing
in Mandarin. I mean, this is fucking horrifying stuff. And to me, I won't participate in it. People often ask me like, well, what if Tencent offered to buy Lilimo or whatever? I'm like, I'm just telling you right now, I'm not selling anything to a Chinese interest. Like, Chris said it, and it said it perfectly. Look at Embracer. They're not Chinese. And by the way, Activision, we were talking about Call of Duty, is 5% owned by China. And so I'm skeptical of all of these things. And it's like, I've made fun of websites that are owned by Chinese interests too. They're not going to write about this.
Yeah.
So I'd rather,
I feel like it no, I just want to say, like, I know I interrupted you. That wasn't like latency or anything. I just want to make sure, because I feel like there's always somebody chomping at the bit for something. I want to make it clear when we talk about China, and to be fair, like, I would extend this courtesy to people who were talking about Israel as well. When we talk about these things, we're not talking about the people. We're not talking about like Chinese people or your average Israeli person or like any. This is all strictly to do with the government and how it functions. I just want to get that across in case some psycho is out there like picking us apart, being like, "He hate Chinese people."
No,
because I feel like there's at least one person.
Of course there is, but they have to know better than that. It's about.
I know,
of course, it's organizational, but it goes back to to what I was saying about Israel and the gaming industry, where, hey guys, there is genocide happening, right? Cultural genocide for sure happening right now in China, and China is not a free society. You can't go on the free internet there. You can't do anything you want there. You have to have their social media scores, and they disappear you, and they disappear your family, and there's no voting, and this is not a good place. So we can deal with them. We can deal with the existence of them, right? Like I buy G.I. Joes, they're manufactured in China. That's just the way it goes. But when I sell my own goods, at least I don't have to participate in that. When I make my own games, I will make sure to be as offensive as possible to the communist Chinese in some place in that game, and I'll make sure it never leaves. It might be some Easter egg because I don't want their money. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to some happier topics. Number 8. The longtime Test Drive racing series is on the verge of being revived. That's because the first new game in the series in a decade has been revealed, and it's due out on both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on September 22nd of 2022. It's called Test Drive Solar Crown. It's under development at French studio Clayton, and it's being published by the aforementioned Nacon, which we mentioned earlier. We brought up during the RoboCop discussion. Solar Crown will take place in Hong Kong, so that in and of itself is going to be a controversy. And according to website Push Square, quote, the game will retain its MMO-style hook, with players able to race together both through the city and across off-road terrain, end quote. As for Test Drive, its revival wasn't expected. The IP was rumored to have been acquired by Nacon from its earlier owner, Atari, which published 4 games in the franchise from 2002 until 2011. But Test Drive goes all the way back to 1987, when it was released on computers from Canadian developer Distinctive Software, which was later purchased and folded into publisher Electronic Arts. The series continued under its original publisher, Accolade, which people might remember, through the 90s. Accolade was acquired by Infogrames in the late 90s, and Infogrames was then absorbed by Atari a few years later, so that's how the IP traveled. The series first came to the PlayStation in 1997 with Test Drive Off-Road, and 14 more Test Drive games were launched on PS1, PS2, PS3, and PSP, the last being 2012's Test Drive Ferrari Racing Legends on PS3, developed by Slightly Mad Studios, the once Codemasters and now EA-owned team working on Need for Speed and Project Cars. The team making the new Test Drive game, Clayton, is best known for its annualized WRC racing series, which it has been the steward of since 2015. WRC itself, of course, was at one time a PlayStation-exclusive first-party franchise, shepherded by Evolution, a team Sony would later buy, and which would later go on to create both MotorStorm and Drive Club. So I don't know if you guys have anything interesting to say about this, but I wanted to bring it up just because I was curious in my own research. It was originally going to just be in the wrap-up. And I was like, I want to follow where Test Drive has been, and it kind of needed its own write-up. What do you think about that circuitous route there, Dustin?
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking up and watching the trailer and just looking at the comments to see what people are saying, and they're like, this was Forza Horizon before Forza Horizon was a thing. And I actually think I remember the original Test Drive Unlimited was, I believe, on 360. Because I'm looking at an image I can remember. I think there was like a demo or something, but it's just and I couldn't believe how many Test Drive games there are now that I'm looking on Google. So it's cool to see it being brought back, obviously in a competitive space though.
Yeah, I dig this just because I'm such a nerd for the industry that the IP began at Distinctive Software. Distinctive Software was bought by EA, and then EA the series. So that studio was taken off of it. Accolade continued to publish the games. Accolade was acquired by Infogrames. Infogrames was acquired by Atari, and then an EA studio later came in to make a game. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. Did you ever play these games, Chris?
No, I remember seeing some demos about them, but like I was never that big on racing games anyway. But especially ones that like, I don't know, like Test Drive isn't a great name. You know, it seems kind of like a code name. You know, like something like, oh, it's like before you come up with like a placeholder. That's the word I was looking for. So like I would just see it and I was like, all right, that's a car game, I guess. Must be a test. You know, must not be finished.
Right.
Yet,
it would be like a funny, you know, like those simulator games that we talk about all the time. It would be funny if their test drive was like you sell cars at like a car dealership. It's called test drive.
Car dealership, car salesman simulator.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be awesome. You get to just waste people's time.
Yeah, I've never bought a car, so I have
good.
no idea. I don't know anything about it.
Sucks.
I bet. I'm sure it does. Why does it have to be that way? By the way,
I don't,
because I've heard people say. I heard people say like literally have gone in and said like, I want this car. I have the money for it, and I want it now. And it takes like.
It's hilarious. Like it takes so much longer than you think it does, for no reason. Like it took me like. I had all the money, like I could have bought it in full. I was like, hey, I want this car. This is the car that I want. And we were just doing like the car that I have now is a friend of mine's old car. We were literally just doing like a transfer of like, you know, ownership. And that took like 6.5 hours. It was grueling. And then they're playing this like fucking like Sarah Borealis or whatever on the fucking loudspeaker. It's just awful. Just an awful experience. Akin to hell,
just
I would say.
Hysterical. Well, do you all right, well, you know what, before we even did you have something to say, Dustin? I think you might have.
No, Chris summed it up.
Okay.
It's just like sitting in the dealership and then the car salesman asks what you do and you're like, I make stuff about video games. Oh, my son plays Fortnite. It's like,
this is why I make things up. This is why I make things
honestly
up when I talk to people. You know, I actually, very nice woman I'm working with for my landscaping. She came over, and you know, when like people, like, I think I'm a pretty funny person, but when people, you can tell when people find you like look funny and like they seem to like be around you. So me and this woman have a really nice rapport, and she was like, you know, what do you do? And I was like, I play, or I'm like, I'm in the video game industry. And she was like, oh. And then she's like, what did you go to college for? And I'm like, American history. And she's like, oh. And I was like, it's not even worth talking about. Doesn't make any sense. All right. Speaking of Atari, number 9, the storied company appears to be on the verge of returning to proper console gaming. According to an Atari Pen press release, the company is, quote, quote, in the implementation of a new strategy for Atari gaming, aimed in particular at devoting new resources to the development of higher value added premium games, end quote. According to the company's current CEO, Wade J. Rosen, Atari's, quote, intent with any gaming experience is to provide accessible and joyful moments of meaningful play. That's the core of Atari and what binds our history with our future. To that end, we feel that premium gaming is better representative of this type of gaming experience and the Atari DNA, end quote. As such, the release notes, quote, Atari intends to shift its video game portfolio to premium games for consoles and PC, end quote. While the letter goes on to name some investments and divestments the company intends to make to this end, specifics are otherwise outstanding. Atari, the company once synonymous with home gaming in the 70s and early 80s, has been a greatly weakened entity ever since. It went through multiple forms and restructuring, even being owned by toy company Hasbro for a time. It is in its current form, it has actually been chasing free-to-play gold on mobile with varying success, and the company is actually a publicly traded entity, though it only does sales in the low tens of millions of dollars per year. Unfortunately for Atari, however, it sold off some of its hardcore assets, including the aforementioned Test Drive, as well as Draken, Timegate and Deathgate, Alone in the Dark, Hogs of War, Star Control, and Total Annihilation, as well as some of its more casual fare, including Backyard Sports, all in the name of getting out of bankruptcy about a decade ago. So the ironic thing about this is that Atari has nothing anymore. And Chris, it kind of begs the question, why even bother? This is my whole thing, is like, why is this? I like Atari 2600. It's cool. And it's incredibly important. They're a storied company, but Nolan Bushnell, of course, everyone loves. But this name doesn't mean anything anymore. The last Atari published game I remember playing was the Alone in the Dark remake on PS3. I don't even know if you guys remember that. And then they went away after that, and they sold all of this stuff. In fact, I think Star Control was bought by THQ Nordic. So they're going back into the space with not much revenue and not much IP. So I'm wondering what you think their success rate might be.
I don't see it looking bright. I just to be blunt about it, like that Alone in the Dark game that just brought back so many. That was the one where you had to blink, right?
Yeah, it was like something weird with like that. Yeah, it was a very weird. I remember not beating it because I hated it, as I recall.
It wasn't very good. I'm kind of with you where it's like, look, this is important in the history of video games. Like Atari will forever be like, they will forever be very important to the conversation about video games and the history of it and the medium and everything about it. It's like, cool. But, you know, they're not, I'll put it this way. I'm not sitting at E3 every year waiting for, you know, the newest installment of Asteroids, you know, or like, you know, God bless those old games, but they just don't mean anything. Even to the people who like kind of admire and can remember and can respect that time, because they just haven't done anything in like a long fucking, and even the last thing they did, like we mentioned, was just kind of one note and very just not good at all.
Yeah, they went into bankruptcy after Alone in the Dark came out.
Yeah, so I mean, look, it's cool that they're trying to make something out of this, but like I just don't see what is there for them. Like, didn't they just put out like some crazy thing, like a console?
Yeah, VCS, I think. Yeah. Which is just like, you know, I got to give Atari credit because they were the first company to start licensing retro consoles. I don't know if you guys remember, like 20 years ago, they started releasing like 2600s with like all the games in it. So there is kind of influence there. It's funny. They're at the embryonic state of a lot of these ideas that outgrow them, but they haven't been a force. It's been so long since they've been a force that I wasn't even alive when they were last a force. It's not to say that they weren't selling anything, but I'm 36, and Atari was blamed for killing the gaming industry just as much as it was given credit for helping create it in the home ecosystem. So Dustin, what do you think? Do you think, because my whole thing is, on one hand, it's kind of exciting because they can come out with something totally new. They're not tethered to anything. They don't fucking own anything anymore. But on the other hand, if they wanted to get like some sort of foot in the door, it might have been nice to have something to do it with.
Right. I mean, for me with Atari, it's like, how long? I mean, it's honestly incredible they've survived this long. They're like in a perpetual state of identity crisis. They like remind me of, like, imagine if like a 50-year-old guy comes up and he's like, have you heard this new band, just rock band, Imagine Dragons? They're awesome. You're like, bro, like this is where you are way behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. This VCS thing was like super weird, and there was like controversy about like the way they kickstarted it and stuff. I don't fully remember, but then like think about their other, even in the 90s, like the Jaguar and stuff. They're like, guys, it's 64 bits. Check it out.
I'm going to save you. It's the Jaguar. I'm going to say
the Jaguar. Yeah, isn't that what I said? What did I say?
You're saying Jaguar. Jaguar. Are you not saying that? Am I fucking crazy?
Jaguar.
You are saying that, Dustin. You are saying Jaguar.
Jaguar. My confidence has been shattered.
Hold on a second.
I'm leaving the show.
Listen to me carefully. Jaguar. Yeah, like the cat.
Jaguar.
Oh my God, I can't. I think we got to just.
Okay, wait. But okay. The console, their 64-bit console. They show here's a cube with an exotic cat on it. Check us out, right? And they just have never figured it out ever, and they're always trying. So I guess we can applaud them for that. But like, even look at how they've handled one of their more recently successful, or not more recently, Roller Coaster Tycoon is a game that they've had, and they tried to bring it back. They're like, oh, here's Roller Coaster Tycoon 4. It's a mobile game. Here's Roller Coaster Tycoon World. And it's like, they have never gotten it right. And it should be, I don't want to say it should be simple, but it's like, just here, as a fan, like, do these things in the bullet point list. Do this, and that's all you need to do. Don't make it mobile, right? So, I don't know. Maybe this could be a restart for them, but I doubt it.
I'm just looking at the Jaguar pad. It is so bad, dude. There are like 24 buttons on it. And it just has a number pad on it for some reason. I have no idea what the hell they were thinking with this thing. I have literally no idea. I remember playing it in KB Toys. I'd be like, what is this thing?
Oh my God, KB.
Yeah, dude, that's one of those systems that they went on clearance, and you could buy them for like $20. And man, if you had one of those in box right now.
I remember, I've said there are two systems I remember clear as day in the KB Toys when I lived in New Hampshire, in Newington, New Hampshire at Fox Run Mall. One time they had an entire stack of Virtual Boys, and the other time they had an entire stack of Jaguars. And I remember being like, damn. And I also think about the NES remake from 1994 being sold for $50 each at Toys R Us in like a huge like stack. And I was like, man, if I could just time travel and have bought all of those, I'd be fucking rolling in it. I mean, didn't a Legend of Zelda copy sealed is going for over $100,000 right now at auction as of the time we're talking about this? I mean, imagine if you could just go back and just be like, give me all of the copies of Zelda, all of the copies of Mario, like even a sealed copy of the original Super Mario Brothers, not bundled. So not Mario Brothers, the arcade game, not the bundle in, but Super Mario Brothers on itself is worth like an enormous amount of money. And if you look it up, the interesting thing about this is no one knows the exact date that Mario launched. You ever read about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's undecided. Like no one really knows.
It was like the New York limited launch. Right.
There's like a whole article. I think Wired did it a long time ago where they go into like what the possible dates are. And I find that so fascinating. You know, like
that is wild. I actually don't know anybody who had the original Super Mario Brothers that wasn't just like the Duck Hunt thing.
Yeah, there's a Mario Kart that you could have bought later, because later on they sold like that was like the, what do they call that? The Power Pack or whatever. But there was like an NES they sold without it, and then I think there was an NES they sold with Rob, and so like it was possible at some point that you wouldn't have gotten it, and so you had to go buy it. And God, the original Mario is so good. Oh my God, such a good game. Number 10. After more than 2 years of support, NetherRealm Studios' popular fighting game Mortal Kombat 11 will no longer receive DLC. Word comes by way of a brief tweet from the company, which confirmed that it was moving on to a new unannounced project. Mortal Kombat 11, released on PlayStation 4 in April of 2019, has been a commercial and critical success for NetherRealm and its parent publisher, WB Interactive. The game itself launched with a roster of more than 2,000 fighters, with 12 more added across 3 DLC packs since launch, including adding licensed characters like the Batman's Joker, comic book anti-hero Spawn, and movie action stars RoboCop, Rambo, and the Terminator. It's unclear what's next for NetherRealm, which morphed out of defunct studio WB Chicago more than a decade ago, and which is largely busied itself with Mortal Kombat's revival since beginning in 2011 on PS3. The team also works on the DC Comics-centered Injustice series as well, which has seen release across both PS3 and PS4, and last launched in the form of Injustice 2 in 2017. Dustin, I'm curious, what do you want out of NetherRealm? We know that they're moving on. I was a little surprised about how nonchalant they announced it, but it's time. It's 2 years. I don't think Mortal Kombat is incredibly popular. It's popular. People like it. So they have a fighting game studio and they're open. I wonder if they're going to lean back into DC.
Yeah, I think that's likely. Injustice and Injustice 2 did so well. It makes sense for them to lean back and do a third one. I would always like to just see them do something new, just because they're kind of like flip-flopping between those two IPs right now. But, it would be weird to leave Injustice just as 1 and 2. Go and make a third one, I guess, and kind of round it out.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, that's literally my exact opinion. like word for word. Like I think it's weird to just stop at 2, just make a third one, and then I would want something new. I just don't want like a consistent, because honestly, like Mortal Kombat, like it's weird. I know that they have the same DNA, but like I always liked Injustice more than Mortal Kombat. It just feels like a nicer game to play to me. I don't know what it is.
It doesn't feel like it's trapped in the early 90s with its characters. That's what I can't stand Mortal Kombat for that reason. I just can't stand the characters at all.
Oh, really?
They're not cool.
That's one of the things that I kind of like about it. It's just it's charming in the way that it's just like obsessively 90s and very, very like absurdly gory, to the point where it's not even offensive. Like like it's just, that's too comical to take seriously.
I had the SNES version of the original Mortal Kombat, which was which had blood instead of sweat instead of blood. So like there was no blood in the game. Yeah. I remember getting it. I remember clear as day, 4th grade. Remember very well. I was so excited, and I was disappointed because I wanted it, and I just look at Street Fighter as being so much, first of all, it's way better, but it's also so much cooler to me. Like the characters. Yeah. You think about Guile.
It is way better.
All it's like, and then you think about Scorpion. It's like, oh my God, man. You think about E Honda's fat fucking belly. And then you think about Johnny Cage and his Johnny tattoo. All right. Number 11. PlayStation Now's newest addition certainly signal a possible changing of the tide for the largely overlooked streaming service. For starters, here in July, PS Now is due to receive Rockstar's 2018 smash hit Red Dead Redemption 2, which will remain on the service until November 1st. This is an interesting selection, not only because of how big of a game it is for PS Now, but because, as noted by website Push Square, you can't stream it. You can only download it. The website notes that fellow Rockstar game Grand Theft Auto 5, which was on PS Now for a time in 2019, had GTA Online disabled. And so it's not unheard of for Sony to tweak the rules for this studio. Still, this seems designed with the idea of keeping the experience awesome for players, and it's perhaps the first time for a PS Now game that it has not been available to stream. Santa Monica Studios' 2018 God of War reboot is likewise joining the service, although this is far less significant since it's also available in the PlayStation Plus collection, and it has been since the perk launched last year. But don't worry, there's even more. Team Ninja's 2020 PS4 and PS5 console exclusive Neo 2 can now be played on Now, as well as so-called moving simulator Moving Out, popular Yakuza JRPG Judgment, which will be removed on October 4th, and the recently released Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 and 2020's NASCAR Heat 5. So, pretty nice month for PS Now. 2 months in a row, pretty good. Last month, of course, was The Avengers. Not a great game, but certainly them trying to get better. And obviously Borderlands was added, Borderlands 3. So, Chris, what are you thinking? I mean, PS Now is looking pretty good, and it seems like they might be... I don't know if it's because of their relationship with Rockstar, the bandwidth required by Red Dead or what, but I really like to Push Square's notice that they were like, this might be the first game on PS Now that you literally can't even stream. What do you think?
Yeah, a little weird since that's like the kind of like the whole point, but I do look, it's a good selection of games. Like it's good. Like this is a good selection, and I think PS Now does have a good selection of games as it is. That's never really been my contention with PS Now. My contention with PS Now is I'll go through that list of really enticing titles, and 50% of them I can't download. And that's annoying. Like, I like to know that, like, if I'm looking at, like, a whole library of games, I like to know that all of them are downloadable. And I can install all of them whenever I want. That's kind of the thing that, like, PS Now is kind of wrestling with. It's got all these great PS3 games that I see, and I'm like, oh, man, I'd love to play that. And then I boot it up, and it's this, like, weird, like, watercolor-looking pixelated mess. And I'm like, all right, well, now I'm not going to use this for a while because I have like a really shitty experience with some of the games that I can only really play through that service. So it's just, I don't know. I think they're on the right track here. I think that's good. I think it's good that they're getting like really good titles here. And I think it's wise to move away from the streaming aspect, and at least as far as like the main thing. But it's still just that thing. It's like, you got to get everything that is only streamable right now. You gotta figure it out, man. Like, you just, because it's just too cumbersome to like navigate. It's like, oh, that one's streamable, that one's both, that one's not. It's just, I know it's simple, but like when I'm just like trying to relax and like find something to play, and it's annoying to figure out like how I can play like what, it just makes me not want to use it, you know?
Yeah,
which is like the problem that they have to solve.
I completely agree with you in the sense that, and I tweeted about this one because I want to give them props. I mean, I saw that PS Now collection, and I was like, or the PS Now entries, and I was like, it's better than what Game Pass added last month by far.
Yeah,
so
totally.
But I agree with you. I need everything, including the PS3 games, to be downloadable. Dustin, what do you think about PS Now's kind of moves the last few months?
Something I'm questioning is, so Neo 2 is one of the games. I'm wondering if this is going to have the same problem as Avengers, in that you will not be able to play the PS5 version of it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there are any PS5 versions of the games of anything on PS Now yet.
Dude, PS Now, I think you're right, Colin, and they're making some good moves as far as the selection of titles, but they got to update it to include some PS5 stuff, or at least the games that are cross generation, to be able to play the fucking PS5 version of the game. Like, I understand most of your install base is still on PS4, but you got to be forward thinking. Honestly, I think that if they really do believe in PS Now, it should have been more compatible, I should say, with PlayStation 5 day one. So, because right now the service, when you're like, oh, sorry, PS5 users, you can't use the better version of the game, that looks antiquated. It's embarrassing. Like, get it together and figure it out, because if you had the disc, it would be a free update for Neo.
Totally.
Like, so they need to update it beyond. Dude, I completely agree with everything Chris is saying as far as like the weird mix of like what's streamable and what's downloadable and stuff like that. But there's just a lot of things that are making this service now appear pretty janky.
The issue is that I feel like they just didn't position themselves in a way that was really conducive to backwards compatibility from the start. Like, because I mentioned, like, when we got the PS5, like the day that we got it and we had that episode, I was talking about how, yeah, like I launched Miles Morales and it launched the PS4 version. And I was like, why does this look jankier than any game I've played on PS4? What's going on? And then I realized, oh, I had to select the PS5 version. It's like, all right, well, that's annoying. And it's like a different SKU with its own different saves. And it's like, even just the generation prior is kind of fucky, like as far as like getting things running in a simple way. And I get that it's like, it's a simple thing that you have to do to mitigate it. But the fact that I have to do anything at all when on the competition, both on console and on PC, doesn't require me to do anything other than just launch the game on the machine that I'm using it on. It comes across as kind of budget, and it makes it feel even more budget when it's like, hey, I'm paying for this streaming service, and then I'm using it on a PS5 and I get the previous generation version of it, when on every other machine I get whatever my console can run, even on like the subscription services that are on those other platforms like Game Pass and shit like that. So they've got a lot of work to do with PS Now. And that's not, I know that sounds like really like, you know, like doom and gloom in it, but it really is just like they just have to get it to a place where it's not cumbersome, where they don't do these weird like, oh, you don't get the new version just because you pay us a premium. It's like, well, what the fuck am I doing then? What am I paying for? I don't know. There's a lot of work to be done, and I hope they can do it, because I think we'd have a better ecosystem in general and a better industry if we have these two platforms competing with each other at their fullest, instead of just what feels like right now is just like it just kind of feels like a pale imitation right now of what's happening on other platforms.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that for me, they're doing some of the work really well. The game acquisitions are coming. It looks like they're willing to spend that money. I don't know how much it's costing them. They don't seem that unafraid. I was a little surprised actually by how good the PS Now games were this month, especially compared to the PlayStation Plus games, which were, like you said, we got Plague Tale on PS5, but PS4 players can just upgrade that for free. So I think people felt kind of gypped there. And meanwhile, like some of the good stuff was going to PS Now. So they need to get both of those going in tandem in a way that makes much more sense. Again, God of War being on PS Now is irrelevant because who has PS Now and not PlayStation Plus? And you already have God of War. So there are some weird things that they need to line up there. But JJ Kazempor wrote into us on Patreon. I thought this was interesting. He said, hey, CDC machine, not a question, just an FYI. Did you know that you can access a PS3 screen from your PS5? It's true. Though through the powers of PS Now, I was giving streaming on the service another shot and learned of this fact. In this limited menu, you can access and look at your friends list and trophies, including PS4 and PS5 titles, all in that old school feeling XMB. You can even sync your trophy list with the PSN from this menu, and it takes forever, just like the old days. I thought this was just as neat. I just thought this was neat. I know Colin has pointed out that the PS5 menu basically turns into the PS4 menu in the settings tab. 3 generations strong in one machine. Now, I thought that was really cool as well. It's so funny that, because you have to sync your trophies on PS3 versions of the game from the PS3 screen, and it's so because I don't know if people I'm sure a lot of people out there had a PS3 that are listening, but it could sometimes take like a half an hour to sync your trophies. It was nuts. I had no idea what the hell was going on with that. The more trophies you earn, the worse it got. So thank you for that.
How do you access the XMB on this thing?
Well, I imagine since it's running on an emulator, you must have to play like Dead Space 3 or something, then hit the PlayStation button, then it probably brings you to the cross media bar. You know?
Yeah.
I would assume that's the way it's working.
Yeah.
Because as I understand it, because they have literal farms of PS3s running these games. Like there's no tricks. Like they have thousands of framed PS3s at their servers farms, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah. That's how they're. I love that. I love whenever like old games do this thing where it's like, because that's how backwards compatibility works on the Xbox as well. Like if you hit start and select at the same time, it brings up the original guide and it like lets you flip through it. It's pretty cool. I'm glad that part of legacy titles is preserved in some way, because that is actually really cool.
Agreed. And finally, a wrap-up, number 12. Website Push Square reports action RPG Tales of Iron comes to both PS4 and PS5 on September 17th. Pseudo sports game Blood Bowl 3 has been delayed out of August and will now come to PS4 and PS5 in February of 2022. And pretty cool-looking French Revolution-themed action RPG Steel Rising comes to PlayStation 5 in June 2022. Website Komatsu reports multiplayer RPG Blightbound comes to PS4 on June 27th. Twin-stick shooter RPG Trigger Witch from our friends over at Rainbite comes to PS4 on July 28th. Cannot wait to play it. Written by listener of the show and personal friend, Jono Peck. Adventure game Omno and arcade flight game Skydrift Infinity both come to PS4 on July 29th. 3D platformer Pile Up Box by Box comes to PS4 on August 17th. Sci-fi action game Blackwind comes to PS4 and PS5 late this year. Horror adventure game Saint Coder comes to unspecified PlayStation consoles later this year. Story-driven game Vampire the Masquerade Swansong has been delayed and will now launch in February of 2022 on PS4 and PS5. Goofy-looking action game Clash Artifacts of Chaos, looks so weird, comes to PS4 and PS5 at some point in 2022. And horror game Ad Infinitum comes to unspecified PlayStation consoles in 2023. Gamatsu also reports that realistic skateboarding game Session, once slated as an Xbox console exclusive, will now come to both PS4 and PS5 when it fully launches, albeit at an unknown time. Japanese publisher/developer SNK, owned by Saudi interests, another company that's a problem, revealed that the next iteration of its long-running fighting series, King of Fighters 15, will come to both PS4 and PS5 in the second quarter of 2022. And finally, congratulations to Capcom, Resident Evil Village has surpassed 4.5 million copies sold. Not too shabby. All right, boys, it's time to get into, we only have 5 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience this week. Tradition typically indicates that we have 6, but I made some error in the document that Dustin pointed out, and I delete the thread with all the inquiries after I take everything out of it so no one wastes their time submitting when it's too late. So in other words, I fucked myself. But let's begin with these 5 here. Hi, I think I'm real, wrote in and said, why do we say mechanic when we talk about a function in a video game? Mechanics are the men who change my oil and replace my tires. Shouldn't we say mechanism? Does this bother anyone else? Am I insane? All the best. So I don't know how you guys feel about this, but you're not insane. I just don't think you're reading it right. Mechanic is both a noun and an adjective. So you're talking about the noun mechanic, but there is almost no better word as an adjective than the mechanic of a video game, because it's, think about celestial mechanics, right? All of these different things. It's about the way things operate and work in a system. So I personally love the term mechanics, but I know that Mike and I have been talking a lot because I've had this idea for a long time about how I want to do eventually a podcast or a video of all gaming terms and all gaming terminology to go over, like, we take everything for granted. What's chip damage, right? Like things like that. Or like there's all these ways we talk about games. And I think mechanic is another one of those words. So Chris, do you take umbrage with the word mechanic?
No, I like it. I like it more than mechanism, I think. I think mechanism is a bit, it's just slightly, it's literally just one, mechanism is just one syllable too long for me to bother saying it. That's literally it. And I think it just sounds nicer to say mechanics. I think we've been saying it for a long time too, so it's probably just ingrained. There's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of vocabulary that we just kind of like accept in games that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. Although I think this is one that does, you know.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but mechanism is a noun, right? So it's like the same kind of problem that he has, where we're talking about the more ethereal nature of interacting with the game. I don't. Yeah. What do you think, Dustin, about this?
I was thinking about this, and I looked up the dictionary definition, which is, you're right, that there is the noun and the adjective, and it says of or relating to manual work or skill. So I was trying to figure out if that makes sense still. But again, it's like we have all these terms in video games that don't make sense anyway. But I was like, what's an alternative? Like the features, because that doesn't really sound right. The functions in the game, like nothing else feels right. I feel like mechanic, maybe we've just given it its own new definition, and that's just sometimes how language works. It changes and adapts.
Yeah, I like what he's saying, but I mean, in preparation for the show, I went and looked up, what are the synonyms for this word, and even when you're talking about synonymous words of mechanic, it's always talking about the noun. Like it's hard to talk about the word is an adjective. So it is interesting, but it's just one of those many gaming terms that we throw around, bandy around, that no one has any fucking idea what you're even talking about when you're outside of this world. And I really want to get my mind around that at some point and try to develop something that's fun for both people to listen to that are like us, but then like maybe their loved ones or something, where it's like a fun podcast to be like, here's what some of the terms we use mean.
Yeah.
And, you know, ray tracing and stuff like that.
That's a fun idea. Because I remember like when I played the Destiny raid for the first time, I remember a friend of mine was like, okay, you got to clear some ads. And I'm like, what?
What does that mean?
yeah,
I never heard that one.
It just means like take care of all of the lower level enemies.
Oh, okay.
You know, just that are around the boss, or like
I think
that fill up an encounter.
Yeah, I think that, well, someone told me once it means additional enemies. So you clear the ads, the additional enemies. But
Yeah,
I hadn't heard that either. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like ads? Like,
Yeah,
is this ad blocker? Or are we like, you know, like,
yeah, that's deeper than I've even ever gotten. Cause I'm thinking of like, you know, even the idea of like crouch, right? Or like, it starts really simple. Like, you understand what, if you say crouch to someone in the real world, like that's not even a word. They know what it is, but it's not a word they would even really use. Right. But or duck, like I just think boss. I love this kind of stuff. Jump. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just a whole amalgamation of words in our field.
Yeah.
And making sense of it, I think, would be really fun.
And crouch jump.
Double jump.
And then there's terms
Double
like
jump.
buff, debuff, DPS. Someone's a
RNG.
tank.
Yeah.
RNG, you know, there's a whole
like RNG is so funny because I didn't know what that even meant from like a long time ago, for many years. I just knew what they were talking about. And then I'm like, it literally means random number generator. Are you kidding me? Like, there's no better. This is also the thing where you need like people that use words nicer can come in and say like, well, we're not gonna call it RNG. Call it like, that's why I like using the term dice rolling, which is another term. Anyway, Zachary Abel wrote into us and said, hey, hello fellas. Persona 4 is quickly looking to reach its Vita sales count on Steam alone, approaching 1 million copies. Is it time for this game to be ported to console? Dustin, I know this was one of your predictions for E3, and I find myself a little perplexed about why this game is isolated where it is. I know that we also have this argument about Persona 3 Fez, but Persona 4 specifically, you would think that they'd be very eager to do this, and I have to imagine it can't be long now.
Yeah. So the only thing I know about this, which I mean, he's a nice guy, but there's a guy that I've talked to, Spencer from the SMT network. So he covers these types of games, like Atlas games. He came on my stream and said that the reason it wasn't announced at E3 is because Nintendo wanted all eyes on SMT5. And so they are waiting, and it will be announced sometime this summer. I don't know if that's true.
For Switch or for everything?
For everything.
Yeah, so what you're saying is they were going to reveal it through Nintendo, but
no. They just didn't want, like, since Persona and SMT are like sister series at this point, that they didn't want another SMT or Persona style game during the E3 period that would take eyes away.
Oh, so
from,
Atlas,
since that's a Nintendo exclusive game.
I got you. Okay, I understand.
Yeah,
right.
So Spencer from SMT Network says that it's going to be announced, or his sources say that it'll be this, like, right around now, like post E3, before Tokyo Game Show. I don't know if he's right, so I'm putting him on the spotlight right now because I have no knowledge. But that would make sense to me just from a business standpoint. Like, duh, they're approaching, let's see, 1 million on Steam alone, dude. Idiots like me are gonna go and buy this game again, and there are many idiots like me that will do that. Like, people will double and triple dip on these games because they're, you know, fanatics and stuff. So yeah, it's not a matter of if, just from like a pure logic standpoint, it's a matter of when.
Yeah, I think it's time, just because, like we've been saying, now it is what we were saying about Final Fantasy, the Pixel remakes or whatever, about how they have one opportunity because there's really no chance to re-release this stuff again. It's just going to be available forever. So that could have some, that could be part of the equation too. But I don't think, Chris, that they would. Persona 5 was big, and they released Persona 5 Strikers, the Muso, through Omega Force and all the rest. But I would think the time is now to get all of this shit out. I would go all the way back. I mean, I don't even know what's stopping them from going. I know that the PS1 games are not like that well regarded, but people will buy them. And So I'm confused why you don't just go like, now is the time to get this all out, especially because Persona 6 presumably is years away. So what are you waiting for?
Did you know that in some of those old Persona games that Hitler is a canon character?
No, I didn't know that.
He's actually in one of them. And they changed him and they gave him sunglasses in the West and called him the Fuhrer. But he's like a legit speaking role character in Persona.
I want to know more. Like, I want to know, because I know people make fun of, like, there's an image going around. I think it was in our memes channel on Discord. Come join us on Discord, by the way. We have thousands of you over there. It's awesome. It's connected to Patreon, so it's very easy to do. But there was a meme where it was like, it's the people with the swords in the round table, and it's like all the different swords, and it's like Persona fans and Final Fantasy fans and Witcher fans and all this, and like not getting into it until the third one or something. So there's like Persona fans in quotes that have definitely not played those. I mean, I haven't. Definitely not played those old games. Innocent Sin and shit like that. Isn't that one of them? And there's like a bunch of old PS1. Anyway, we'll see, Zachary, when that happens. Hidari Shotaro wrote into us and said, hey there, CDC. Been a longtime fan of Colin since the Beyond days and have grown to love Chris and Dustin. And this is my first time submitting a comment. Thank you. My question to you all is, what qualifies as a skilled gamer? I've always thought that I'm very adept at all types of genres, but I was recently hit in the face when I purchased the Castlevania Requiem collection on PS4 and proceeded to get my ass handed to me in Rondo of Blood. Meanwhile, Colin is excellent at 2D side-scrollers, Chris is the best at FPS games, and Dustin is a weeb. I've just wondered the different ways people consider one to be good at video games. Thanks for your time. Dustin, isn't this funny that this comes up? Because when you were here, we talked specifically about Chris, because I was like, there is something unholy about Chris's skill in video games. And it came up because we were talking about how I tried to get Chris to play Mega Man 2, thinking that he was going to fail when I was in California. And then the video was like awesome because he was totally fine. And of course, we did the video when like he hadn't played Titanfall 2 in 3 years and then got me a trophy that I couldn't get in like literally 5 minutes. And so we were talking about Chris's unholy skill with games. Like it's just weird. And meanwhile, my skills seem to be atrophying. Dustin, how do you define like what is good and what is bad? And because it's so, I brought this in because it is so weird. We were just talking about this and how I feel like I am well above average in 2D games, but I'm pretty average. And people really bust my balls like I'm bad at 3D games. I'm not, but I think I'm pretty average at those games. So what do you think that's all about? And by the way, before you answer, Hidari, Requiem, Rondo of Blood's fucking really hard. So I'm just throwing that out there too.
Right. Well, I think they kind of put this already in the question, is that not everyone, but a lot of times people have the specific type of game that they're good at. Like okay, here's a really good example. My wife, Holly, very good at RPGs and strategy games. When we were, early in our dating, when we were in college, we would play Civilization and she would play with my friends who played like dozens of hours. She would always win. I have never seen anyone beat Holly at Civilization to this day. Like, she's the best Civ player I know. There's probably like pro level players that could beat her, but from my circle, if you put any kind of first person game in front of her, she has no clue like she can navigate, like she understands the mechanics, but she has no skill in that at all. Is she not considered a skilled gamer because she can barely move around in Halo or something? No, because there's other games that she is like way better than anyone I know at. So it just all depends, I guess. I don't know. The skilled gamer thing too, you like walk a fine line where people start like saying that you need to have certain skills to be qualified,
right?
Not just as a gamer. Sometimes it comes into like, oh, are you a real gamer? You haven't played.
Well, it ties into the trophy thing we were saying earlier. Same kind of argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I always find there's always truth in every joke or stereotype. Like the games journalists aren't good at video games, which I think I do find to be often true.
Yeah, it's true. It's true and it's not. I mean, again, it's that Cuphead video where that just ruined it for everybody.
Right. Well, the thing is, it's like what games, maybe the media needs to figure out. It's like, okay, get your guys that are good at certain things and have them review it. And maybe you could have outsider perspectives on a podcast or something, but it's like, I don't know. It's like, the Cuphead. Why did they even release that, dude? Or the Doom video? I know we've talked about it on the show.
The Doom video, which is from Polygon. I think Arthur Geese over there did the Doom video, which was her. I remember watching that and being like, "What in God's name?" I remember being. I think he like wasn't reloading or no, he wasn't aiming down sights. It was something weird where. But I've said that I've been. I'm sorry, Chris.
I remember what it was. He would stand still and shoot, and then it was like he couldn't move and shoot at the same time, which is literally all that Doom is. It's literally the whole point of the game. Is literally it invented run and gun, like actually, like straight up. That video, man. It just confuses me why people just don't get because that's the thing. It's like you want people who are good at these games to review them. Right. So just like give, and granted, you might find yourself in a situation where there's a game that nobody's particularly good at. And maybe you can find some way to do that and like just hand it off to somebody who you might think is the best. But first person shooters are a very popular, very commonly played genre. I don't believe for a second there isn't one person at Polygon who couldn't have played Doom Eternal well or Doom well.
Right.
There has to be at least one person. But as far as like the question, like I think to be like a skilled person really just means that you just have a specific skill. And that could be like, as long as you're good at something in the game space, like you could be like super good at, Mario Kart and nothing else. I would consider that a skilled gamer, in one aspect or another. Like I find myself pretty good when it comes to most traditional like input led games. Like I can play like a 2D game, I can play a fighting game, I can play like an FPS. Those are the games that FPS specifically I understand most because I've thought a lot about how I would design them and like I've thought a lot about those, so I'm typically pretty good in that entire arena. But there are some FPSs that I can play. I'm not good at all at like Counter-Strike, that is a game I just can't do it because so much of that game is aim and that's it. It's not really about maneuverability or like movement in the same way that Doom or Halo or Call of Duty or Battlefield is. It's a very specific thing. So even within genres, there are gaps in knowledge. Like I know, Colin, you're really good at 2D games, but I'm sure there's some 2D games that you're just like, fuck?
Cuphead is one of them. We were talking about like I just don't have the patience to learn it. Right? I'm like I don't want to do this. This isn't fun. And likewise, there are 3D games that I'm quite proficient in, but generally speaking, it's all on a line. I just remember the people that I knew, like Charles Oniet at IGN was one of them who is just really good at games. And you're another one of these people I met who I'm like, this person has a natural inclination towards understanding games. And I think a lot of that has to do with, it goes back to the vocabulary you were saying, but also just the idea of, and you said it with Holly, your wife, Dustin, which was being able to pick up a controller and just know what to do. I think that's kind of it. And then the skill from there is almost not really important. It's almost like what your knowledge is. Like, how do you know it? I play Borderlands 3, for instance. I haven't played in a while, but you pick it up. It's there's numbers everywhere, all this shit. Do you know what to do or don't you? You don't need to teach me that game. Yeah. So I think a lot of it has to do with just being in the pocket, knowing how things go. And I think with Requiem, with this particular question, it's funny because Rondo is before Symphony of the Night, but just play Symphony of the Night. I mean, Rondo of Symphony of the Night is way easier. It's an action RPG. And then go back to Rondo if you want. It's unfortunate because that particular collection does not have save states. So you can't can't scum or anything like that, another term. But you can do that in the Castlevania Anniversary Collection of all the SNES or NES, SNES, Genesis, all that. And I admit that with Kid Dracula and some of those games, I definitely saved scum because I'm like, I'm not fucking doing this. And I needed those trophies.
Yeah. There are, I don't know. I think everybody has gaps in knowledge. Like strategy is like a weak point for me. Like when we were playing that, you remember that YouTuber simulator game that we did?
YouTubers,
dude, that entire video I'm looking at the screen, that entire video, and it looks like fucking hieroglyphics. I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. I don't know what the key point of focus is. I don't know what the gameplay is even. Like, it is very confusing to me in that. And I would even say, like, as far as 3D games, like, I think you're probably better at Returnal than I am. Like, I wouldn't, I mean, you've made it further, so that would dictate.
Could be.
That
but
would,
what we need to figure out is
something.
like time spent versus skill extracted and all of that, right? Like a lot of people are like, yeah, you beat Returnal, but you died like 80 times. I'm like, yeah, I sure did. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic question. I don't really know that it matters. I mean, we've talked, Chris, about I love Civilization going back to, which is a series I brought up going back to 4. So I'm not like an old school fan, but I didn't even really understand how to play it until Civilization 6. And when I actually stopped and like read about it and watched videos, and I'm like, I'm playing this totally wrong. I have no idea what's going on in this game. So it's also funny how like I've played Civilization for hundreds of hours and wasn't even really doing it right. Like in terms of like, there's so much to understand. And so you can, it's also funny how there's some games that allow you to fake it and some games where you just can't do it.
Yeah. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is one of those where like, I remember playing a ton of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater as a kid and then realizing that there were other tricks beyond just like holding circle and turning around. Right. And I was like, oh, I'm shit at this.
Oh, yeah, well. And that's a game too that was really early in trying to encourage players to do different things by like remedying the scores and the bonuses based on that, which I think is kind of cool too. I mean, that's a really important game for that reason. So it almost introduced like S ranks in like constant bursts by saying like, oh, do these things in this order and don't do it again and you'll get a better score. It's pretty cool. All right, thanks for writing in, Hidari. Anthony Gigi wrote in and said, hello, gents. What the fuck is Sony going... when the fuck, excuse me, is Sony going to give us an update about the PS5 SSD storage expansion? We haven't heard a peep about it since Mark Cerny's Power Hour, and I'm starting to lose patience. Do you think we could hear something about this once during their state of play, or is it a slot, the red herring, that it will never be used? Sony, step up your game. Sincerely, an entitled gamer. I want to reiterate something I've said recently that's been reaffirmed in my own life. PS5 games are getting smaller. PS5 games are smaller than their PS4 counterparts. I don't really think that this hard drive situation is as perilous as people thought it was going to be. Actually, pound for pound, I actually think that the core PS4 hard drive in 2013 is smaller than the PS5s, not in literal gigabytes, but in the size of the games per the space given. Chris, do you think that we're going to see the solution to this soon?
Yeah, the average size of a game.
Exactly. Like, do you...
Yeah.
Sorry, we have a little bit.
My concern... Yeah, there's definitely something going on right now, but I'll say my hard drive has been filled multiple times and I've had to like delete shit, and it is kind of annoying because I feel like I don't really have that much on it in comparison to most people. I mean, Destiny 2 is probably like the biggest game I have installed on that thing, and that's not egregious. It's not like a Call of Duty like 150 terabyte sized monstrosity that's just sapping all my bandwidth or anything, but while I don't think it's as perilous as people make it out to be, because ultimately, I mean, you could just delete things and re-download them. Obviously, there are people with data caps that would be a big problem for. But at the same time, I do think that the hard drive is still just too small. Like, I just don't think... I never thought, like, even with the Xbox and the PS5 when they both launched, one of the main problems that I had with both of them was just like, this hard drive is just unacceptable. Like, it's just for the size of games now and how often we are expected to download updates and here's a new season of whatever and here's a new patch of whatever that will inevitably bloat these things. Like, I don't think sub 1 terabyte was ever okay on either of their behalfs. I think this should have been like a 2 terabyte minimum, just knowing how things progress. Not that games aren't smaller, but they're still fucking huge. Like they're still pretty big, right? And some of them are egregious. We've talked about Warzone, which is, I got to look this up just so I know exactly, but like I know Warzone size is comedic and that's a super popular game.
Yeah, it's true, because I was just kind of, I guess, flabbergasted by it even being true on the lower end. Like when I downloaded Doki Doki Literature Club, I think it's something like 2.3 gigs on PS4 and 1.5 on PS5. So there's like some truncation going on. Like the two versions of the games are totally different sizes. So Dustin, what do you think about this problem? Doesn't it also have something to do with the 750 megabytes? Doesn't it have to work in groups of 750 on the SSD? Isn't that the whole problem?
So during that Power Hour, he mentions it in the question. they did reveal the specs that I believe it had to be like 7 gigabytes a second transfer speed or something, which I'm looking in that there are drives out that would meet that spec. Like I'm looking at a Samsung 980 Pro for 1 terabyte. It's $200. So they're not cheap. The only thing that I can think of at this point is that they are having problems with games running either to the same quality or maybe even at all off of it, because something about the PS5 SSD is that the fact that the SSD is on the motherboard, the silicon's right on there, and they have special interfaces that are, it's different from just like, there's not just like one of these plugged in on the inside. It's like integrated into the system. So, maybe they're having issues getting it to work right, which is kind of, not good. That actually would make sense because they delayed it. Like, why wouldn't it just be ready at launch? They clearly were like, we're still working on getting external drives to work. And so that's going to be delayed for the time being. So I don't know, though. You think they have to say, I say they have to say something soon, but they really don't. Like, they can just keep writing. They can just act like they never said that. They really aren't obligated, I guess.
They're acting like they didn't say a bunch of other things. So
right.
So yeah, I thought I could have sworn. I mean, I'm a fucking idiot with tech, as you guys know, but I could have sworn that like the 750-ish gigabyte was because it can't be like a gig, or I'm sorry, it can't be a terabyte or something like, right? Isn't there something about the base numerology or something with SSDs that is different? I could be making this up, but
well, it's sub 1 terabyte just because there needs to be a lot of like stuff for the OS and a lot of like internal things to function. So that takes up the 1 terabyte of like advertised space. But there's no reason that it couldn't be more than I will admit that I am very limited tech wise as well, but I don't see why they couldn't have put a bigger hard drive in there outside of just the obvious thing, which is it just costs more and would have driven the price of the machine up, which I think is really the only reason why we got the space that we got. You know, it's not that they can't do it. It's just, we want to be competitive at a price point.
Sure. That makes sense. Final question comes from Joseph Lacina. He says, hello, gents. Last weekend, my girlfriend and I were playing Sackboy's Big Adventure on PS5. I highly recommend it for those looking for a casual game with those who don't you said blame, but I think you meant play games often. Later, we switched to our PS4 Overcooked save and we made a shocking revelation. The DualShock 4 feels almost unplayable now. Holding it feels so off due to the smaller sizing. Have you tried to go back to the DualShock 4 and had the same issue? Has the DualSense truly made DualShocks unplayable? Thanks, boys. I won't say unplayable, but I will say this. You create very specific by the millimeter muscle memory on these controllers. And when I first got the PS5 controller, I kept hitting things in the wrong place because the controller is more bulbous. So like the PlayStation button's like not where it's supposed to be, but I have acclimated myself to that, much like predictably I've acclimated myself to the UI for the most part. And I will just continue to say that the coolest thing about PlayStation 5 is its controller. And so I'm so pleased that it's made DualShock 4 kind of irrelevant because it's so much better. It really is a true jump. Obviously, PS3 to PS4 was a jump in and of itself, the first one really ever since the dual sticks were added. And so I personally really love this controller. I have no interest or plan on ever playing my PS4 again unless my PS5s break for some reason. So, Chris, have you gone back and tried to use the old boy?
No, but I remember like kind of doing a bit of cleaning and finding my DualShock 4 and holding it just out of curiosity, and it does feel just wrong. It feels completely wrong. I'll be real, like I was never that big of a fan of that version. The DualShock 4 was just always kind of like a weird shape to me. Like it worked just fine and it was comfortable, but I actually did kind of have a preference for like the PS2 for whatever reason. And this DualSense is so much better. It's a way better form factor. It feels nicer. It did take a little bit of getting used to because it's so different, but I think pound for pound, it's like way, way better as an input device, and just not even just completely ignoring the haptics and the dynamic triggers and all the new next gen shit that they put in there. Just as an overall form factor, it just feels a lot better. And I immediately was sold on it when I saw it. Because I was just like, yes, it just looks like a Xbox controller as far as like the size goes, but it's got the PlayStation layout, which is exactly what, it's exactly the kind of controller I like. So while I have not used the DualShock 4, I could imagine that it would feel just really weird now.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I went back to play BioShock Infinite around the holiday for Knockback and I went and platinumed it on PS3, that was like really weird going back and playing with that piece of shit. But not the console, but that controller is horrible. Dustin, what do you think?
Yeah, I raved about the DualSense at the launch of the PS5, and I like the way it feels in my hand, and when I'm playing for short bursts, it's great. But as I've mentioned on the show, I've got a weird fucked up thumb thing that when I do extended play on the DualSense, it hurts my thumb. Which this is like, I've been to the doctor. They've told me I probably will need surgery. I've delayed it for the time being. But I don't have that problem on DualShock 4 at all. And it doesn't, I don't know, it's weird. It doesn't feel antiquated to me at all. Like, I will consistently use the DualShock 4 either on PC or if I'm playing PS4 games on my PS5. I almost wish that they could make the DualSense and just make it a little smaller or something. Because, like, I don't know if it's the size or something about it is just doesn't, it makes my hands hurt. So, but yeah, I use DualShock 4 all the time. I have no problem with it.
All right, well, that's all we have for this episode. Now, we're not done recording because we have to come back in the future and put it in the past in the show, but we're going to watch the state of play and make sure we have plenty to say about that, or maybe we won't. Maybe it'll be fucking horrible. But I think that we'll have a lot to say about Deathloop. I'm excited about that game, so you will have already known by the time you heard this. But it's time for us to go. Chris, do you have any closing comments?
No, I think I'm gonna try and knock out that Sacred Symbols Plus episode today, and I'm also going to try and probably do my last bit of work on Ratchet.
Excellent. We're gonna do that spoiler cast in the next week or two, I think. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, the 12th.
All right, perfect. Yeah. Oh yeah, so it's coming up soon. So we'll be ready for that. I think you're gonna be on that too, right, Dustin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And you didn't seem very enthusiastic about that. So
no, I am. I was like, oh, I finished it a few weeks ago now.
No,
so
me too. I
platinumed
it ages ago. I didn't delete it though because I want to go back in and kind of look at everything. But we'll have a nice fan-driven conversation about that, of course, and we'll do a call in next week as well, so you guys can look forward to that. But Dustin, do you have anything left to say?
No, other than remember Plague Tale out on PS Plus. I went and downloaded it today because I do very much want to play that. So I might try to dive into that tonight.
I went to add it to my library and it already said download because I bought the PS4 version. So I kind of feel a little ripped off. But
dang it.
PS Plus is just not ripped off is not the right word. PS Plus it gives and it takes. Yeah.
Sure.
All right, boys. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show and all things Last Stand Media. Of course, our Xbox show, Defining Duke, our retro show, Knockback, all supported on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. We could not do it without the more than 12,000 of you that support us over there and get special perks for doing so. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.